Cohen.
Here.
Mendoza.
Here.
Hilpern.
Here.
Chow.
Here.
Tanya Budi.
Here.
Kartha.
Here. Before we start, I just want to let everyone know that Manuel is here to provide translation services for anybody who needs it. If you just raise your hand. Rebecca, do you mind?
Sí, si hay alguien aquí que necesita traducción, pueden levantar la mano para que Manuel les provea el equipaje para la traducción. Si pueden levantar la mano si hay alguien.
We will start. Rebecca, can you do the approval of the meeting agenda?
Yes, I move that the board approve tonight's meeting agenda as presented.
Second?
Cohen.
Yes.
Mendoza. Oh, we're actually amending our agenda to pull an item out of consent agenda. So we'll be pulling out the student fees out of consent agenda and approving that as a separate item.
Okay, so then can you restate that, say as amended?
Okay, I move that the board approve tonight's meeting agenda as amended.
Second.
Presented.
Second.
Cohen.
Yes.
Mendoza.
Yes.
Hilpern.
Yes.
Chow.
Yes.
Tanya Budi.
Yes.
Partha.
Yes. All right. Then we'll move on. First, we have a public hearing, truth and taxation. The truth and taxation law requires that the district hold a public hearing prior to the board's approval of the final 2018 aggregate tax levy. Members of the public are welcome to address the school board regarding the proposed 2018 tax levy during this public hearing. Are there any comments from the public regarding the tax levy? Okay. Since there are none, I hereby conclude this public hearing. The board will be voting for the approval of the tax levy at tonight's meeting. And then we will move on to superintendent and board remarks. Want to go ahead and start?
Yes, I do. Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome everyone in attendance this evening. We've shifted our agenda tonight to honor your presence so that after our brief comments, we will proceed with listening to your perspectives, your concerns, and your wishes. I do want to announce before I start that we will be going on winter break starting at the end of school this Friday, December 21st. Schools will be closed from December 24th through January 4th, 2019. We will reopen on Monday morning, January 7th, 2019. And on behalf of the entire district, we want to wish one and all a very happy holiday season and all the best for a new year. Tonight, we address safety in our schools. How we create the conditions so that our schools are safe and welcoming and supporting for all children. And in that context, how we continue to create schools that reflect anti-racist values and principles. We will follow that discussion with a conversation on the physical safety of our school buildings and the work we are engaged in to promote safety. I want to start this evening's discussions with my personal and professional commitment to live and activate anti-racism principles at every level of District 65. The use of racial slurs by students is not new to District 65. It's not new to Evanston or Skokie. Yet it will not stop until we recognize that such language is being spoken and until we elevate the voices of those who feel the pain from these actions. I look forward to listening and absorbing the words and sentiments from those of you in the audience and in the community. And in so doing, I will practice, as I hope others will as well, the guiding principles from the district's work on courageous conversations that are essential in conversation and dialogue about race. These essentials are to stay engaged, to experience and to expect to experience discomfort, to speak truths and to listen to truths that are being spoken, and to expect and to accept non-closure. That said, I want to reiterate and state clearly that hate and hateful words with racial overtones and hateful words that reflect other forms of discrimination have no place in District 65. Regardless of our different backgrounds and lived experiences, What matters most is that we treat one another with kindness, compassion, and respect. Anything less is not acceptable. I remain committed to our equity learning efforts, and we will continue to work tirelessly to foster a sense of belonging and safety for every member of our community. I want to recognize the work and support of this Board of Education on these issues. This board and this board's leadership has been out front on its commitment to equity learning and to anti-racist values. I want to recognize Anya Tanyavuti and Suni Kartha's leadership in this regard. Later this evening, my staff, in collaboration with 2 community members, will talk about how we are creating conditions in the district where children respect each other day in and day out. These conditions include our commitments to change our policies and procedures, our sustained equity learning for our staff, our deep dive into culturally relevant practices in curriculum and school climate, new discipline, gender, and dress code policies, and our efforts to detrack our algebra class, the last District 65 class that was actually tracked. We have a significant way to go, yet we are working as a school community to create safe conditions for learning where children will not be verbally attacked. Tonight, we are here and I am here to listen openly to the concerns of the community. We will continue to do so in 2 additional community meetings in the new year. And tonight I am here as a white leader in this district to listen openly so that I can be part of the efforts to address systemic racism and discrimination in our schools and in our communities. In this work, I am driven by a writing from the Talmud, which declares, "Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justice now. Love mercy now. Walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. This work will require commitments at the individual level, at the system level, and the community level to make the changes we require. I welcome the discussion and your perspectives and ideas. Thank you."
Thank you. Other board comments?
Yes. So, excuse me. I echo some of your sentiments, Paul. We would be remiss if we implied that the experience of racism, implicit and explicit, in our schools and our community was new. It's been present in our interpersonal relationships between children and adults and within our institution for some time, as it has in our nation, and it is represented in segregated housing, employment patterns, in our institution, and disparate discipline and outcome data that's been created by policies and practices that have long outlived their original intent. The effects of these realities in the experience of racism is simply and unfortunately not new. And frankly, 3 years ago, when I first joined the board, I wasn't confident that our institution or our District 65 community had the will and skill to have this conversation that we're having tonight. Hence, I operated in hope and in urgency that one day we would be, and here we are. I have drummed repeatedly that drum of hope, saying that we need to be informed, brave, and bold at the governance body and administrative level so that our community and our staff can be as well. And 3 years later, after participation throughout our institution and community and Beyond Diversity and SEED, and culturally responsive teaching in the brain training, and making policy through an equity lens with the engagement and voice from many stakeholders throughout our community, after board retreats and work with the Teachers Union Reform Network to have collaborative plans with our DEC colleagues, here we are tonight. As a Black woman who was once a Black child, who was called and told many of the same things that we have heard being said to children in our community today, and who subsequently was not protected, validated, or heard, it pains me deeply to hear of the harmful experiences that children and families have had. But I am also so grateful that our institution has been doing the work necessary to become brave, bold, and empathetic enough to respond. I'm grateful for the response tonight to my original requests last spring and again this fall. Last spring and this fall, I said, I would like to see us make time as a board to discuss how our schools are actively declaring themselves and their values to be anti-racist to children and families. If they are not, what are we saying to children of color and their families about how we value their emotional and physical safety? What affirming and expansive racial messaging are children receiving about the extensive contributions and deep value that Black peoples brought and continue to bring to the world, our community, and our schools, to counter any efforts of dehumanization? What books or facilitated conversations are being used to respond to symptoms that are showing themselves? Racism and racial resentment exists in this space. What is being done to make clear to children and families the gravity of the use of racial slurs and racism and ensure it is explicit that it will not be accepted in our schools? I'm so grateful that tonight the discussion begins and that this fall the work has begun in earnest in many of our schools. I think it's important to note the power of this work to prevent and respond to marginalization in all of its many forms: religious and ethnic exclusion, sexism, ableism, and transphobia included. Though while that is the long-term hope, we're still in our infancy in this work. Thank you, everyone, for your voice and your presence tonight in helping us as schools and a community progress and protect our children from the social ill of systematic dehumanization and exclusion. Let us continue to link arms and fiercely put ourselves between our children and those who are targeted for harm from the effects of dehumanization. I want to explicitly say again to our children and families that all of our public schools belong to all of us, and you are bright and loved and wanted. I believe in and support your greatness, and I expect amazing things from you. I, too, once upon a time was underestimated and viewed as a statistic, and I've defied every single one. And you who feel weighed down by those same low expectations can and will, too. We Black people are descendants of greatness and untold history and cultural values that have shaped the world. Our ancestors founded the first libraries, made architectural wonders, and built fierce and vast civilizations. We have resisted subjugation in many forms, and we can and will resist it today and tomorrow, together. Shine bright, beloveds.
Thank you. Do you want to go ahead and read?
So our colleague Sergio Hernandez is not here this evening, but he sent us a statement that he would like for us to read. I'm going to read the statement in Spanish, and then Suni is going to repeat the statement in English. Me da mucha lástima en escuchar sobre los insultos raciales utilizados por los estudiantes para herir a otros estudiantes en nuestras escuelas. Y aunque tenga mucha lástima, no estoy sorprendido. Haber sido creado en una de las regiones más diversas y, sin embargo, raciales y económicamente segregadas del mundo, he sobrevivido y a veces he perpetuado los efectos de racismo. Además, tengo que mencionar el ambiente tóxico que ha creado el liderazgo nacional y que alienta y expone las peores tendencias de nuestro país hacia deshumanización y inequidad, y contribuye al estado de los asuntos en nuestras escuelas. Cuando era un estudiante en la década de 1980, mis amigos y yo fuimos objetos de insultos raciales y discriminación por parte de maestros, policías e incluso de compañeros blancos y de color como yo. Recuerdo que me llamaron mojado, que me decían que me volviera de donde vení. Nací en Chicago. Al reflexionar sobre la discriminación racial entre estudiantes, quiero dejar claro que lo que hicimos como estudiantes fue aprendido por los adultos en nuestras vidas, que tenían puntos de vista intolerantes y ignorantes. Aprendí a odiarme a mí mismo y a mi herencia mexicoamericana a causa de estas experiencias, pero también porque no encontré ninguna validación o reflejo de quién era en mi experiencia educativa. Como educador, trabajé intencionalmente en algunas de las comunidades más marginadas y desinvertidas, mis comunidades. Y me dediqué y corregí los errores que pasaron a lo largo de mi vida. Me comprometí a hacer una reflexión positiva de los estudiantes que enseñé, que enseñará el plan de estudio de manera relevante para sus vidas y sus experiencias, y de tratar a sus padres como compañeros de su educación y con respeto y dignidad. Desafortunadamente, los líderes escolares y algunos de mis colegas no sintieron la necesidad de hacer lo mismo y vieron a los niños y familias marginados a quienes teníamos la tarea de servir con desdén y indiferencia. Y cuando las familias necesitaban apoyo adicional, muchos de los estudiantes escolares para los que trabajaban simplemente no tenían los recursos para ayudarlos o simplemente ignoraban sus necesidades. Todo lo que parecía preocuparnos era asegurarnos de que tuvieran un buen rendimiento en los exámenes en el tercer grado y más allá. Como padre, trato de incluir habilidades de empatía y pensamiento crítico en mis 3 hijos. Mi esposa y yo intentamos monitorear las redes sociales y la música que escuchan, mientras explicamos que se encontrarán con racismo, misoginia y homofobia. La mayoría de las redes sociales y la música de hoy en día que he encontrado son como los medios con los que crecí, llenos de violencia, misoginia y homofobia. La única diferencia es la tecnología de hoy. Hace que esto sea más ubicuo y accesible que nunca y continúa perpetuando el racismo, la misoginia y la homofobia. Le pregunto a mis hijos sobre sus experiencias escolares con el racismo. Mis alumnos de secundaria de 2 canales me dicen que no han oído hablar de ningún incidente racial en la escuela o entre amigos. Mis estudiantes de 2 dicen que recientemente escuchó a un estudiante blanco llamar a un estudiante negro mono desordenado en su camino a casa después de la escuela, pero dice que es la única vez que ha escuchado o presenciado este tipo de incidente y compartió su incomodidad por haberlo presenciado. Como miembro de la Junta y presidente del Comité Política, he informado para estas experiencias y las experiencias que los padres del distrito han compartido con la Junta y conmigo. Les pido a nuestros colegas, la administración y de la Junta que exploren cómo podemos desarrollar la capacidad de nuestras escuelas en ayudar víctimas de ataques raciales, nuevamente codificando protocolos detallados, encontrando y trabajadores sociales y psicológicos, creciendo la capacitación del personal por desarrollo profesional para responder a este tipo de incidentes en nuestro manual de políticas escolares. Nuestra declaración y política de equidad es como los cambios recientes en las políticas de nuestro código de vestimenta escolar y las políticas de LGBTQ proporcionan un punto de partida y un camino para abordar incidentes racistas y otros incidentes de odio entre estudiantes. Nuestras exploraciones, cual de las políticas de disciplina y suspensión y expulsión, también brindan a nuestra comunidad escolar la oportunidad de abordar el racismo a través de nuestras políticas escolares. Me gustaría invitar al público a nuestro próximo comité de políticas febrero el 5, para ser parte de esta conversación y ayudar a modelar la política que responde a las necesidades de sus hijos y las familias que han sido victimadas de programas, políticas y prácticas que perpetúan y exacerban la inequidad racial, la supremacía blanca y sus efectos. También me gustaría solicitar a nuestro Consejo y nuestra Administración que adoptemos de inmediato un glosario de equidad racial para definir nuestro trabajo de equidad racial y utilizarlo como una pieza complementaria de nuestra herramienta de evaluación de equidad racial. Esto asegurará que nosotros como institución nos responsabilicemos de este trabajo transformativo, importante, pero frágil, al ayudarnos a erradicar la desigualdad en nuestros programas, políticas y prácticas. Por último, me gustaría agradecer a todos los miembros comunitarios de esta noche, especialmente a los que están ubicando en su espacio vulnerable a compartir sus experiencias con nosotros, que tal vez sean dramáticas. Lo vemos, lo reconocemos y lo consideramos, compañeros, en este trabajo. De cambiar nuestras escuelas y lugares seguros para nuestros niños. No podemos hacer ese trabajo sin su voz y participación. Sergio Hernández.
So for our non-Spanish speakers, I will provide the English translation. Again, these are our board colleague Sergio Hernandez's words. It is heartbreaking to hear about the racial slurs used by students to hurt other students in our schools. And although my heart is broken, I am also not surprised. Having grown up in one of the most diverse and yet racially and economically segregated regions in the world, I have experienced and at times perpetuated the effects of white supremacy. Also, I would be remiss to not mention the current national leadership and the toxic environment they have created that emboldens and exposes our country's worst tendencies towards dehumanization and inequity and contributes to the state of affairs in our schools. Growing up as a person of color in the 1980s, my friends and I were the object of racial slurs and discrimination from teachers, police, and even from fellow students, white and of color, like myself. I remember being called a wetback, a beaner, and a roach coach, and being told to go back to where I came from. I was born in Chicago. As I reflect on my experience with student-on-student racial discrimination, I want to make it very clear that what we did as students was learned from the adults in our lives who held bigoted and ignorant views. I learned to hate myself and my Mexican-American heritage because of these experiences, but also because I found no validation or reflection of who I was in my educational experience. As an educator, I intentionally worked in some of the most marginalized and disinvested communities, my communities, and dedicated myself to correcting the wrongs I have experienced throughout my life. I committed myself to being a reflection of the students that I taught, making the curriculum I was told to teach them relevant to their lives and connected to their experiences, and treating their parents as partners in their education and with respect and dignity. Unfortunately, school leaders and some of my teacher colleagues didn't feel the need to do the same and viewed the marginalized children and families we were tasked to serve with disdain and indifference. And when families needed extra supports, many of the school systems I worked for simply didn't have the resources to help them or just flat out ignored their needs. All we seemed to care about was making sure they tested well in 3rd grade and beyond. As a parent, I try to instill empathy and critical thinking skills in my 3 sons. My wife and I try to monitor the social media and music they listen to while trying not to suppress their independent exploration of our world, and explain that they will run into racism, misogyny, and homophobia. Much of the social media and music of today that I have encountered is, like the media I grew up with, filled with violence, misogyny, and homophobia. The only difference is the technology of today makes this more ubiquitous and easily accessible than ever before, and continues to perpetuate racism, misogyny, and homophobia. I asked my sons about their school experience with racism. My 2 Chute middle schoolers tell me they haven't heard of any racial incidents at school or among friends. My Dawes student says he recently heard a white student call a black student a, quote, disorderly monkey on his way home after school, but says it is the only time he's heard or witnessed this type of incident and shared his discomfort with having witnessed it. As a board member and chair of the policy committee, and informed by these life experiences and the similar experiences district parents have shared with the board and myself, I ask our administration and board colleagues to explore how we can build staff member capacity and make victims of racist attacks whole again by codifying detailed protocols, staffing support, staff training, and professional development to respond to these types of incidents in our school policy manual. Our equity statement and policy, as well as recent policy changes in our school dress code and LGBTQ policies, provide a starting point and path toward addressing racist and other hate incidents between students. Our current exploration of discipline and suspension and expulsion policies also provides our school community an opportunity to address racism through our school policies. I would like to invite the public to our next policy committee meeting on February 5th to be part of this conversation and help shape a policy that is responsive to the needs of children and families who have been victimized by programs, policies, and practices that perpetuate and exacerbate racial inequity, white supremacy, and its effects. I would also like to request from our board and administration that we immediately adopt a racial equity glossary to define our racial equity work and use it as a companion piece to our racial equity assessment tool. This will ensure that we as an institution hold ourselves accountable in this transformative, essential, but fragile equity work by helping us eradicate inequality in our programs, policies, and practices. Lastly, I would like to thank all of the community members here tonight, and particularly those who are putting themselves in a vulnerable space by sharing their traumatic experiences. We see you, we acknowledge you, and we consider you a partner in this work of transforming our schools to safe havens for all of our children. We simply cannot do this work without your voice and involvement. And I just want to quickly add, because I know that we have a lot of people who are signed up to speak, and I want to make sure that we give space for those comments. As I'm sitting here looking at this standing-only room tonight, I'm reminded of several years ago when we had a similar standing room only meeting and heard from primarily parents of color who were pleading with us about the inequities they were experiencing and how they felt their children weren't being served in ways that were that was manifesting itself in the gaps in opportunity to achieve that we had been seeing for years, for decades. That meeting was really a starting point for us to develop a racial equity statement and then later a racial equity policy, to doing the Beyond Diversity trainings and to engaging in all of this work. So as hard as it is to hear the stories, we need to hear them. As uncomfortable as it makes us, that discomfort is where the change is going to come from. So I thank all of you for being here, just like I thanked all of you for being here years ago and for helping to spur the conversation forward. You're here to move the conversation forward again, and I can't thank you enough for that. So thank you all for being here.
I would just like to add again my thank you for everyone who's here tonight. I get choked up because a lot of these conversations are very personal. And as a parent, some of the most challenging work that we do with our students is try to walk them through these difficult conversations. And like Sergio, I had a conversation with my daughter about race and whether or not she experienced racism at school. And so I'm going to invite the parents that are listening and the parents that are here, have that conversation at home with your students. And you're probably not going to have the answers, but listen, just take the time to listen. And I encourage you to make use of incredible resources that we have in this community to hold those conversations and hold that space with people of color that are retelling incidences that are hurtful and in many cases traumatizing. We live in an incredible community, and everybody who moves to this community prides themselves on the diversity that they move to the city for. And like Suni has said, change is not easy. It's painful, often. And I'm really thankful for the people that we have around this table, for the leadership in this community, and I am extremely hopeful for a better school district that we, as a community, are going to work towards for our kids. So again, thank you. I'm here to listen.
I don't want to say too much because I do think we need to get to the folks who we want to hear from, but I would want to echo what Rebecca said. These are extremely difficult conversations. As Suni had said, it's really critical for us to listen and hear. I think about it in the context, and I'm of the Christian faith, so right now I'm going through Advent. A couple weeks ago, we lit the candle of peace as the second week of Advent. And as I sit here tonight, I think about, I have throughout my life thought of peace as sometimes quiet, and that's not true. The opposite of peace is really separation, and sometimes to come together, all times to come together, we have to have loudness and we have to have voice, and that's not necessarily where I have come from. Peace was everything's quiet. And so I think it's really important that we have everybody's voice here for us to not be separated in the work that we have to do. And so I thank you so much for being here.
With that, we will move on to public comments. Members of the public are welcome and invited to address the board during open public meetings. The Board of Education will not permit the voicing of personal attacks against any district employee or board member. Please remember, and I will ask that given the number of speakers that we have tonight, to please remember and to adhere to the 3-minute. So state your name and then you'll have 3 minutes to speak. We will have a timer that goes off at the end of 3 minutes. We really want to hear from everybody, so we will begin. Our first speaker will be Robin Brown. I'm actually swapping with someone else. Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea. So then the next, if you want to be ready, the next 2 speakers will be Donna Wang Sue and Liz Adams. So can you just state your name and then.
Hello, my name is Tanya Richard. I'm the mother of 2 biracial children in the district. My husband is an alumni of the district, and my stepkids are white. I also travel the country as an equity, diversity, and inclusion consultant. You know the saying, you can't be a little bit pregnant? Well, you can't be a little bit anti-racist either. It's an all or nothing proposition. I am here today because I sense a lack of urgency around the prevention of racist bullying. We know that this is happening in Evanston right now to our kids, and while I am hearing indignation, I am observing a delayed and lethargic reaction that concerns me. It's time for the district to shake off its sleep and wake up. I am also concerned with some of the language in the letter written by Dr. Gorin, because the letter is centered around protecting families of color. And while that is noble in intent, and by the way, patriarchal by nature, it excludes the fact that this is not only about protecting kids of color. White kids in our district who are hearing and witnessing these racist attacks and are witnessing the slow motion reaction of adults are also at risk. They are being fed a message that it's okay to have these problems as long as you feel bad about them, have some things in place if they do happen, and hope to do something more encompassing eventually. Well, eventually could be years, and meanwhile, white kids leave the district never having been a part of a fully overhauled anti-racist culture. Therefore, they will carry the message of eventually into their lives and perpetuate the problem. This work must be done now for the preservation of our families of color and the preparation of our white children to be anti-racist in the world. It comes down to whether we want to create bystanders or interrupters. Please hear me that our students of color who carry the burden of racist bullying are victims, but sadly they are being prepared to enter into a world where they will inevitably encounter more. It is the white kids who will be utterly unprepared to be of any use in fighting and dismantling the systems that uphold them and oppress others. They will spread the toxic thinking and engage in the active inaction they were raised on. And if and when we as a community encounter some horror, like one of our children taking their own life or enacting revenge because the district doesn't act fast or smart enough, then it will be on the district and its good intentions. I don't want that. I know you don't want that. And we don't want that for any of our children.
Thank you. Donna Wang Su, are you taking her?
Yes. My name is Fuchsia, and unfortunately Donna can't be here, but she sent me an email asking me to share. Good evening. My name is Donna Wang Su, and I apologize for not being here in person. I have a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old at Walker Elementary School. My family identifies as a PITA, Asian Pacific Islander Desi American, specifically from Taiwan, China, and Japan. Just several weeks ago in Evanston, another young child called my 9-year-old a stupid Chinese boy and said things such as, "Can you speak English? And can you see out of your slanted eyes so small?" And when my partner went over to address the issue, this child's grandmother got in his face and made some comment about how she can't help him being racist because that's on his parents. I share this story because it's a true story, and because this was a young child, probably around the age of 8 years old, and that was saying, an 8-year-old boy that was saying these hurtful racist comments, who probably learned this from an adult. I currently serve on the Evanston Skokie Council of PTAs, and I have been through several equity trainings and want to view things with an equitable lens. We can continue to offer courageous conversations and support the PTA Equity Project, but no child should hear words such as the N-word or told to go back home to another country. Something needs to change. We need to acknowledge past and present racism, and inequity is due to systems. We need to confront racist incidents. We need to educate and support decision makers in their learning about racism. All children should access enrichment opportunities, and we need to value past and present minorities for who they are and their contributions to our schools and community. Well done is better than well said. Let's do something about this now. Thank you.
Liz Adams, and then the next couple of people, Jocelyn Davis and Cecilia Hoskins. Be prepared.
My name's Liz Adames, and I have a current and future Orrington students. And I'm here tonight speaking in support of systems and policies that would truly ensure District 65 is creating and supporting anti-racist schools. While I'm a career educator, tonight I'm speaking as a parent who has experienced firsthand the silencing of racial injustice at my child's school. These experiences range from friends' children being called racial slurs on the playground to our parent-teacher organization alienating families of color, such as my own, from school activities and equity initiatives. Our new principal is a supportive ally to our equity work, and I believe that our school and PTA want to be inclusive. However, we need explicit systems and procedures to educate our community, allow us to see our blind spots, and to always center families of color in school policies and programming. Thank you.
Thank you, and my apologies for mispronouncing your last name. Jocelyn Davis.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to share my concerns. My name is Jocelyn Davis, and I'm a parent of a second grader who attends Dewey Elementary School. I'm here today under unfortunate circumstances, and it's very disheartening to discuss, obviously, our racism in our District 65 schools, especially at a second grade level. I'm here to share a story, and this is from my daughters, and recently, my daughter was targeted with racial slurs and hurtful language said to her in her art class by two boys who are Asian and white. My daughter immediately told her art teacher what the two boys said to her and was informed by her classmate. And I was informed by her classmate regarding the incident after school. The issue, there are several issues about the incident that happened. First of all, my daughter was called a chimpanzee. She was made fun of her, she was called stupid by the two boys. She was made fun of her hair texture. And unfortunately, as the other panelists were saying, this is still happening even in 2008. And yes, even in Evanston, and yes, even in our schools. And please forgive me, this is my first time speaking publicly, and I'm advocating for my daughter, for African American kids of color. So give me a few more moments here. After the incident occurred, there are two things that were wrong. The art teacher did not contact me. Unfortunately, I had to find out from a classmate, which is very unfortunate. If you're looking at the disparity of the incident, and on the contrary, just not even a year ago, the same art teacher contacted me regarding an incident that involved my daughter and 3 other African American kids where a white child was involved, a white little girl. The 3 students posted a Post-it note on her. And I was contacted, my husband was contacted, the other parents involved were contacted. And when you look at the two situations and the implicit bias that was dealt with, the two situations where the art teacher didn't feel a need to call me when she was informed that my child was called a chimpanzee in her class and was made fun of her haircut, her hair, her texture was called stupid. And forgive me for being emotional, but it's disheartening. Also, in terms of the anti-racism, in terms of the anti-racism efforts, I 100% support that. Some of the efforts after the incident, I emailed the principal immediately. Unfortunately, she was away for surgery, so the vice principal stepped in and handled the situation promptly. After the incident took place, the next day, the vice principal called for an immediate staff meeting, and this is after the incident that happened. And some of the things that were implemented after this incident was a sharing circle. This sharing circle involved the students that were involved in the incident in her class had an opportunity to share how they felt.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker will be Cecilia Hoskins. Okay, all right, thank you. So then next we have Tracy Olasimbo, and Roger Williams will be on deck.
Hi, so my name's Tracy Olasimbo, and I am a mother of a first grader at Dewey in the TWE program. So I just want to start off to say that racism is a form of trauma, right? So since his time at Dewey, my son experienced several acts of racism and different forms of microaggressions from his classmates and staff. So if you guys want to be transparent, the first incident, a white student told my son that all black people were monkeys. The second incident was another student told my child that they didn't want to play with him because they didn't like his skin color. And then while unpacking that, he was also letting me know that he's being teased in class regularly because he's darker than everyone. So as a person of color, bringing up these issues or speaking out has not been easy. And I also I work really hard to be very careful how I share our story to not fit into the specific stereotype. We cannot control what is taught in the homes of others, but we can control how we as a school district and a safe space provider respond. Not all of our school staff understand how their actions inflict harm onto our students. So to build on our situation, the first incident that occurred, no one told me about it. So I found out about it maybe 3 to 4 weeks after the fact, and it was because my son was having a random conversation with my sister about bullying. So we lost out on an opportunity, both me and my son and the other kid's parent, to learn, to teach, and try to resolve it immediately. Our kids are small, so 3 or 4 weeks after the fact, there's not many options left, right, to work with our students or our kids. So failure to tell parents, staff, or parents' administration, and or ignoring it or just brushing those racist remarks under the rug has a really negative impact on our students. I'm grateful for all the positive strides that the district is moving towards, but from my experience and the experience of other families of colors, it's not enough. How do we know that what is being taught in these trainings translates into these teachers' practices and into their classrooms? So as I mentioned, my son is in the TWE program, and all the racism that he's experienced was in this class. He is the only black young man in that class, which makes him an easy target for the racism and bullying. In speaking to other families, the racism and the divide only gets worse as they get older. In such a diverse school district, why is it that my son's the only black boy in his class? I contacted 2 other TWE schools, and there are no other black students in that same grade level as well. My son is in a space that has now been transformed into an exclusively white and Latino space. He has no allies, no sense of inclusivity. So what's ironic is my son is Latino, and he made it into the TWE program as a native speaker. So native speaker or not, he has a right to be in that class and to feel welcomed. As I previously mentioned, my son experienced repeated acts of racism. Now imagine if it was my son that spewed racist comments or was bullying a white student. How would our school staff respond? I'm most certain I would have been notified about the incidents. So I just think we need to stop being afraid to talk about race and have these conversations. And I'd like to challenge the district to create a no-tolerance policy around bullying and all of the isms, and not a punitive process, but a way to teach and learn so that there's a resolve and our students can learn and grow, and how we can also incorporate race into our curriculum so that all of our kids can see themselves.
Roger Williams.
Good evening. I'm Roger Williams, the president of Opal. Let me tell you a little story just for the sake of context. A few years ago, my wife took a trip with some friends up to north central Wisconsin. It was in the summer, and so some of her friends, it was a lake up there, and they went swimming. And they came out of the lake with leeches all over their body. She was really freaked out, and she told me I was freaked out because I don't swim in lakes with leeches in it. Now, this country is like the lake. Like the lake is polluted. In this case, it's polluted with racist ideas. Racist ideas are like leeches and they pollute the consciousness of this country. No area in this country is untouched by them. According to Ibram Kendi, author of the book Stamped from the Beginning, a racist idea is any concept that regards one racial group as inferior or superior to another racial group in any way. Racist ideas such as white supremacy began in Europe in the 14th century and was exported to this country in the 16th century to support policies supporting slavery. Regarding the reports that we've heard and the hateful actions and racist language used by some District 65 students, these are symptoms. The underlying cause is the racist idea of white supremacy. Solutions are required in District 65 to counteract this racial idea, the racist idea. Solutions such as, number one, expand the ACC program, African-centered curriculum. Offered, by the way, we're already teaching Eurocentric curriculum. Offered to white children as well as black children. Teach it in several schools, promote it and encourage white students to learn the truth about black history and culture. Black people know 100 times more about white culture than white people know about black culture. Secondly, hire more black teachers. White students need to see more black teachers. They need to see more black people in positions of leadership. Finally, accept the fact that the achievement gap or opportunity gap is a systemic issue and not the fault of black parents or some other inferior behavior assigned to black people. Stop blaming the victims. Develop goals, plans, and actions to correct racial inequities in District 65. Until we address the cause, we will need to continually respond to hate-filled language and actions. Thank you.
Leslie, and I apologize, I'm not sure that I'm going to be, what was your last name? Yamshan. Okay, thank you.
I probably don't need this. I've been an educator for 40 years. Okay, I'm here to talk about curriculum and restorative justice circles. I want to talk about curriculum because I want to know, are you using Southern Poverty Leadership teaching tolerance materials in the schools? Are you really using them? They can be used K through 12. The other thing is, are the teachers being trained, going to trainings for facing history and ourselves? Are they going? I went to many. I never saw an Evanston teacher there. Never. Now, maybe you're doing it now. If you are doing it, that's great. It is imperative that these two parts of the curriculum are used. Are you using primary source documents in the classroom? Are you taking a document in middle school, like the Declaration of Independence, tear it apart and show where it says savages? Come on, this is what's supposed to be done. Now, the other thing I'm going to tell you, you're not going to like, but I'm going to tell you the truth. I was trained to do restorative justice circles about 6 years ago with Erica Barton. A decision was made to take it away from the police department. It has fallen on its face. It is not working. Let me be very, very specific. It was given to a volunteer. It was completely disorganized. I'm not going to name the school, but I am going to tell you that I saw a group in a locker room in the gym. And the only reason I had the locker room is because my kids used to go to school there and I knew the teacher. Now, I was called in the end of August and September to talk about the circles again. Guess what? I called twice They've never asked me to do it. I'm an educator. I know how to do this. I coach teachers. It's not working. You want to talk about racism? You want to talk about anti-Semitism? You want to talk about anti-Arab behavior? You want to talk about bullying? Those circles can work. They did when Erica Barton was running them. It doesn't work now. I had kids tell me, share things with me. I shared with them my school experiences. It's not working. If you think it is, forget it. It's not. Unless it's working in the rooms, schoolrooms, where teachers were trained earlier. The last thing I'm going to say is I was in a school where I see children of color sitting in the office, hours, and nobody comes to get them. I had a little girl in 8th grade while I was doing a circle that had her coat on by herself. She could have left the school. No one came to get her. When I went to get the secretaries, they said, "We're too busy." I sat with her. What is wrong with this?
Thank you.
I am here as a volunteer. If you need any help, I would be glad to help. But I cannot, I'm telling you now, this is intolerable.
Oliver Ruff. Okay. Okay. Alice, you were next.
Alice Barry, Opal Board Secretary. I'm delighted to see so many people here for such an important discussion about anti-racism in anti-racist schools. And I want to echo what Roger Williams said about systems. I believe it's important that people respond to racism when it shows up, but that's not enough. Racism is systemic, and we need systemic changes. District educators and staff need to intervene when something happens, and what systemic support is there for them as they learn how to do those interventions and to make mistakes and have somebody to talk to when they do. What system is in place for district employees of color to get the support they need so that they will stay in the district? Opal was told last year that a retention plan for Black educators was going to be implemented by December 21, 2017. We have never heard another word about it. And in the meantime, we have seen Black educators leaving the district. I've heard this administration say that the curriculum is going to be revised to become culturally relevant, culturally responsible. Where does that stand? I haven't seen anything on an agenda so far this year. As a white woman, I want white children in this district to learn about racism and whiteness. I didn't learn a thing going through the schools that I went through, which has left me to catch up. Nobody should have to catch up. It should be baked in from an early age. Children should be learning the true history of this country, which was built on racism. This country would not be the country that it is if it weren't for racism. These are just a very few of the systemic changes I believe that need to happen in this district. And we urge you to make them happen so that District 65 can work towards becoming an anti-racist space. Thank you.
Tanya Gall, so I think Robin Brown, were you going to take?
Hi, I'm Robin Brown. I'm a Lincoln parent. I'm speaking as a white parent of 2 white children. I'm also speaking as a member of a family which is committed to anti-racism, yet often falls short. Like many other white parents, we fall short not out of malicious intent, but out of ignorance. When we fall short, both white children and children of color are harmed. We are obligated to do our own work in our homes to educate ourselves where we are unaware. Yet we also look to and depend on our educational institutions. Similar to the values in our family, I know that District 65's heart is in the right place, but I also know that that is not enough. As much as we may like to pretend otherwise in Evanston, District 65 is an institution built on a foundation of white supremacy. The past tells us that ignoring this fact and simply operating with a goal of not being racist has not worked. We need to have more specific anti-racist policies and procedures in place if we're going to reverse the tide of disparate experiences for students based on race. That means both academically and socially. In conjunction with the district's efforts to eliminate the gaps in opportunity to achieve, we need to equip teachers, administration, and families with tools to address the interpersonal violence that we've been seeing of late. I'm confident that the majority of the district's teachers, staff, and administration genuinely want to create spaces where every child is safe, respected, and successful. However, we need to provide more support. In our outrage after each incident of racial denigration on the playground, we expect our school's administration to act effectively. But without a clear anti-racist policy, this is an unrealistic expectation which continues to harm children. As a first step, specifically tracking these incidents of racial aggression is necessary for us to understand what is happening among students and to provide healing to all families. Then we need clear anti-racist district-wide policies to respond to these incidents. I encourage the board to be brave in their leadership by adopting such a policy.
Terry Shepard.
Good evening. I feel like Sophia, one of the Golden Girls. When she opens, picture this, 1979. Our first home in Evanston was on Lee and Hinman. My oldest daughter was in the 3rd grade at Lincoln. The first PTA-sponsored event of the year was a potluck-type event where the families could get to know one another. I baked my little covered dish, sought out the PTA president, introduced myself, indicated I wanted to become involved, and shared that I worked in the loop. She said, and I quote, "Well, I guess you'll just have to keep baking your little covered dishes." Welcome to Evanston. I moved to Oakton attendance area and never had this problem again. Fast forward, I've now had 2 more kids. The youngest is Tasha. She's in the 5th grade. It's baseball season. I coach the baseball team. One of the white fathers coaching from the north side was so enraged with a call that as he railed at me, I could feel the spit on my face. At the end of the game, he had the nerve to ask me to accept his apology. White privilege. Basketball season. Tasha's in the 5th grade at Oakton. Their coach had taught these girls how to run a fast break, and they were unstoppable. By halftime, the Oakton girls were always up 20, 30 points. Outdone by the Oakton girls whipping on everybody, a few Northside coaches went to the rec department and asked Miss Palmer to initiate a slaughter rule. Miss Palmer told them if those were white girls whipping on everyone like the Oakton team was, they would have never walked into her office. Case closed. White privilege. Soccer season, middle school years. Team Evanston. This turned into a North Side against South Side event. Tasha was playing on Team Evanston. The team was made up of black and white girls, all of whom attended District 65 schools. The girls from the South Side, black and white, had played soccer together for years, hung out together. One of the North Side white girls asked the white South Side girls why they associated themselves with the black girls, because they're not your kind. The coach, when made aware of this for the next game, decided to let the girls get suited up, show up to leave for the game, then let them know the game was being forfeited due to these comments. At the time, everyone agreed the punishment was fair. However, looking back, we Southside parents believe the coach should have sat down the girls who made the comments, not punished the entire team, and therefore the very girls who were insulted. The coach was from the North Side, and his daughter played. white privilege. Indoor soccer season, 8th grade. This is a cautionary tale. These same 3 black girls haven't been playing together now 4 or 5 years, each one loving the sport more than the other. For years, they tolerated being called the N-word for the love of the sport. I feel hamstrung this evening in not being able to say that evil, foul, disgusting word that these little girls heard directed toward them for years. Their coaches told them to just ignore it. Neither the referees nor the other coaches said anything in support of the girls. One frigid February night, these 3 girls had taken enough. They had been called blank for the last time. They came to me and told me they were going to kick some butt. But they didn't use that word. And I said, be my guest. I was as frustrated as they. These 3 girls followed some white girls into the restroom, and white girls came running out yelling, it wasn't me, it wasn't me. The black girls were still enraged. They vowed to wait outside to catch the guilty girls as they left. Mind you, it was February with near 0 temperatures. I let them stand outside in the frigid cold for a few minutes, then told them they had made their point. Of the 3, my daughter was the only one of the girls who continued to play soccer. The other 2 had had enough. My last closing. Now, why is this a cautionary tale? Suppose the parents of today's black students at these North Side schools decide they had enough and allowed their kids to retaliate the same as I had with these little girls. District 65 would be at war. It's time to do something.
Sarah Peterson.
My voice has already been expressed by the previous speakers, and I'd like to see my time.
Oh.
Hope Jones.
Wow. Hello, my name is Hope Jones. I have a 2nd grader at Willard and a 6th grader at Haven. And I'm nervous because I wasn't expecting to speak. Okay. Oh, sure, Sarah, I love you. So, I'm sure she did this because Sarah and I are friends, and we met on the playground at Willard, and my voice may shake a little bit, but I think my story should be heard, so. First of all, we were very intentional with moving here to Evanston. We've been here a little over a year. We moved here from Fort Wayne, Indiana. And we are rich, yes, ooh. I have 10 years of education, public education experience as a school teacher. I've taught in Durham, North Carolina, and in the rural areas of North Florida, where when I was a geography teacher, a 7th grade teacher, a student showed up with a Klansman belt buckle on. And the principal told me, well, we'll just have to take that up with the school board because that's freedom of expression. So moving to Evanston for us was supposed to be our saving grace. My husband accepted a job as the president of St. Francis Hospital, and as a stay-at-home mom, I was super excited to be in a space where I felt my black boys would finally be safe. Unfortunately, we've had some incidents. I love my community. I'll start there. And my pastor is actually here, Pastor Neighbors. And we really do love it here. But when my 2nd grader came home the 2nd week of school and said, Mom, I just don't feel like I belong in my classroom. And I said, Cooper, what would make you say that? And he said, well, I'm the only black boy in my class. I was shocked because the year before, there were 2 other black boys in his class. And I went to the school and I inquired, and there was supposed to be follow-up. Obviously, he's still the only black boy in his classroom. And this is a situation where, well, we'll do better next year, but my son has to be the only black boy in his class for an entire year. I want you to think about how that impact that has on a 7-year-old. Secondly, my 6th grader at Haven, same scenario. How's school going? Middle school is middle school. I taught middle school. I get it. But the fact remains that he is saying that there are no African-American teachers teaching core classes at Haven. How is that possible? Someone please help me understand. How in the world does my beautiful black boy not see one African-American teacher or person of color teaching math, science, English? Why? How is that possible? If you have the answers, I'll take them off record. But if I have to go back into the classroom, if that's what we need to make the change, here I am. Thank you.
Tiffany Chan.
My name is Tiffany Simons Chan, and I am a white parent at Willard. And I'm here to say, if we together in our schools and communities do not take an anti-racist stance in our words and in our actions, then we are all complicit in perpetuating the racist system that we have all inherited and co-created. On a daily basis, I am embarrassed and even mortified to gain new insight into all the ways that I have knowingly or unknowingly participated in overt or covert racism and white supremacy. But I push through these feelings because this story is not all about me, and my feelings are not what's at stake here. I'm grateful for SEED. I'm a member of the Tuesday cohort this year, as well as Courageous Conversations at Willard, for providing space in which to engage in dialogue, learning, and reflection with other members of my community. And I am in full support of all the efforts at the district level to create space where all children feel loved and supported as learners and as human beings in pursuit of the vision that Anya spoke of earlier. The burden for changing our system should not fall on the people of color, the people of marginalized social identities. And as a person who walks in many privileged identities, I'm here to show up in whatever ways I can, and I thank you for leading us in an effort to stand together in this work and in this fight. Thank you.
Amanda Richardson.
Sorry. Good evening, everyone. My name is Amanda Richardson again. My daughter, who's here with me on the front row, her name is Mink. She's a junior at North Central College. She's a double major in political science and philosophy, and she's minoring in social change leadership. She's a pioneer in making what you guys say you want in District 65 happen out in Naperville. It's a little bit more white out there than Evanston, so she has a huge task in that. But I left Evanston in 2004 when that baby was, I believe, kindergarten, first grade at Orrington, because a teacher said something to the tune of white people always being in charge and black people always having to answer to them. That was 2004. I came back to this district very reluctantly. It was not my decision. Literally, God kicked me back here. I wanted to go anywhere but back to Evanston. I was completely fed up from my experiences in 2004. So I come back in 2018, and I'm in the building of the school where my two younger children go. I have an 8th grader and a 6th grader at King Arts. And I've told this story before, but I'm gonna tell it again. There were 2 black boys who were going into the classroom on the last day of school last year. And they were already not wanting to go into the classroom. I could tell by their behaviors when it was time for them to go into the classroom. And literally less than a minute after they had walked into the class, they were kicked out. And the teacher had locked the door. So the boys couldn't even get back into the classroom. And because I knew them, I walked up to them and I said, you know what's going on? And they're like, this teacher hates us. If we say anything, it's a problem. Other kids are allowed to say things, but it's always an issue with us. And so I told them, you know what? It's the last day of school. You're about to have an amazing summer break. All you have to do is tough it out, get through today. So I went over and I knocked on the door of the classroom. And the white teacher comes to the door. And one of the first things she tells me is, oh, I love your son. I'm gonna let that sink in. She said, oh, I love your son. What is the difference between my black son and those two black boys that were standing outside of the classroom? Why did she feel comfortable enough to tell me that she loved my son, but she locked these other two black boys out of the classroom? So in that moment, me as a black mom became a mom of those black boys, and I had to mediate keeping them calm to get back into the classroom. I had to delicately take care of the ignorance of this teacher and what she had said to me. I had to look in the eyes of the white students who were upset that the black boys were going to come back into the classroom, and I had to handle everybody's emotions and navigate that to get the black boys back into the classroom. This was 2018, some 14 years after I left this district for the ignorance it showed me in 2004. I walked right back into it in 2018. I've heard so many stories tonight of parents that have had terrible experiences, and I feel like I have PTSD because we've all heard the stories. We all saw Trayvon Martin. We all saw Laquan McDonald. We all have a terrible story to tell about things that happen in this district, but where are the stories of where it changes, of where it stops? You're doing all of these culturally relevant teachings with your teachers and all these professional developments, but here, just last year, you had a teacher show that she wasn't getting anything of what you guys were teaching. I'm gonna say this in my closing. When I came back to Evanston, I was very happy with all the Black Lives Matter signs that I saw all over the place. I thought, man, this is really progressive, but I soon found out that this district and this town is a very Black Lives Matter sign. It's nothing more than that. It is not a Black Lives Matter mentality. And until we change that, we will always just have terrible stories. Thank you.
Heather Sweeney.
I feel like I need to rethink the words that I had prepared, but I'm not good at thinking on my feet. But I will say that I wanted to talk about some things that I know the district is doing and that is happening, but I don't see them in any way as the solutions, but I'm proud that they're steps. So I want to start by saying that. I support moving to an anti-racist framework for the reasons, many reasons stated this evening. The steps the district has taken so far are an important foundation that can catapult us forward in order to change the stories that we're hearing tonight. Anti-racism work is critical for families of color and has been stated. It's also critical for white families. I wanted to talk about a few initiatives that I think are foundational and can be built on. As a white parent, these initiatives have given me ways to bridge what I would call the empathy gap. They've given me ways to deeply examine racism and also take actions towards justice and equity. The first initiative is Beyond Diversity, which I'm thrilled the district is now at a point to offer to more parents. A few years ago, people said Beyond Diversity will never come to District 65. So important steps have already been taken. And the fact that it's here is a real reflection of that, but we know that it's foundational and it calls to be built on. Another initiative is a series called Next Steps. A group of parents from Nichols and its feeder schools organized this series that uses the book, Despite the Best Intentions, How Racial Inequality Thrives in Good Schools. The authors and sociologists Dr. Diamond and Dr. Lewis came to Nichols and will come back 3 more times this school year. They talk about their research that shows that schools are not race-neutral spaces and unintentionally perpetuate racism. This series has been an amazing opportunity to hear directly from experts in the field, and I hope this program can be replicated across the district. It has sparked much conversation and offered new ways for white parents to put their values into action. I also wanted to speak about a group that grew out of Washington School's Conversations on Racism and Equity. Along with other affinity groups a number of years ago, an anti-racism white affinity group was formed for white people to take responsibility for our own racial education, to challenge ourselves, and to better prepare us for cross-racial conversations and cross-racial action. This group that's now open to parents across the district taught me that humility and curiosity are 2 of the most important qualities to pass on to my white children when it comes to anti-racism work. Recently, I heard that an expert in the field said that Evanston is unique in the number of white people who are willing to get really uncomfortable and go deeper with this work. And that led me to another group that's doing really important work. The Dewey School PTA hosted a 4-part series called Transforming White Privilege that was deeply thought-provoking and expertly facilitated by District 65 parents. So in closing, I'll just say that in the documentary that addressed racism in Oak Park River Forest High School, Evanston was mentioned as a progressive model in the documentary and in subsequent panels. We can continue to be this model for how integrated schools can work for all kids. We've started down this path. If we move ahead with curiosity and humility, coupled with courage, boldness, and of course urgency, our schools really will serve every child every day. Thank you.
Megan Kennedy Farrell.
My name is Megan Kennedy Farrell, and I have 2 students at Washington School. In 1990, I was a junior at a large public high school. Our new principal announced he was ending the school's tradition of putting a Christmas tree on the outdoor canopy, citing a desire to honor the school's diversity. And the community erupted. Hateful, xenophobic, and racist letters to the editor were published in the community newspaper, with demands that those people return to where they came from. And students who wanted the tree staged a walkout, emboldened by the hateful sentiments of some adults in the community and the deafening silence of so many others. 28 years have passed, and I still have vivid memories of the racially hateful remarks I heard and read. Vivid memories of the teacher carrying on as if nothing was out of the ordinary, and vivid memories of pained looks on the faces of my classmates of color. But I have 0 memories of anyone standing up, speaking out, encouraging critical thinking, or using that moment to educate in any way. The silence spoke volumes. Students whose identities were targeted were not protected, and as Tanya said at the beginning tonight, white students were left unprepared to navigate a future anti-racist world. What if instead, the administration had been working tirelessly to create a culture intolerant to racial slurs and hate speech? What if my teacher had been trained and expected to facilitate bold conversations in the classroom about systemic racism? What if the district had prioritized representation in its hiring practices and my teacher that day had been a person of color? What if, for the previous 11 years of my formal education, the curriculum I had encountered centered the experiences and vast contributions of people of color? And what if someone, anyone, had spoken up? I'm here tonight because I want these what-ifs to be my children's realities, our children's realities. I want them to be learning in anti-racist spaces where they have models for what to do when they hear racially hateful speech. I want them to learn about historic and systemic racism so that they can make choices, different choices, for our world. I want them to know the truth about the valued contributions people of color have made throughout history and continue to make all around them today. And I want them to dwell in spaces that value the opinions and experiences of their classmates of color. I can't imagine a more valuable learning objective or learning environment. I'm grateful that my children are in this district where some are speaking out and where this conversation is on the agenda tonight. But it's been made abundantly clear in recent weeks, and particularly in the experiences shared tonight, that this is not at all enough. We must do more. All of our children are watching.
Paul Barker.
Good evening. If I asked that any of you consider yourselves racist, would you please raise your hand so we could identify you? I don't think I get any volunteers. but we've got a whole room full of people over there aiming a whole lot of energy at this half of the room. And I was trying to think earlier, why is that? I'm sure you're all really nice, well-intended people. And I realized I got the answer driving home from a class today on NPR where two people were having a conversation. One of them said to the other, "You don't have to have racist intent to contribute to racist institutions or systems." Beautiful summary. So I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you.
Ginevra Galabayadis.
Hi, my name is Ginevra Galabayadis, and I have a daughter at Nichols. I struggled a lot with putting thoughts down on a piece of paper, so I decided I would just speak from the heart. My husband reminded me this weekend that we have been in Evanston for 10 years, which kind of came as a shock to me. I still don't quite feel like an Evanstonian, but I am very invested in Evanston, and I see a lot of potential. When I first moved here and started getting involved in equity work and anti-racism work, I started interviewing people. And one conversation in particular has always stuck with me. I was interviewing a woman of color. She's a black woman who had lived here for 40 plus years. And I remember two things from our conversation. One is that she told me that she never feels safe in Evanston as a black woman. Never. That was a constant part of her experience. The other was that she felt like she had seen the same conversations happen over and over and over in Evanston. And I feel like I've heard that again from some of the people of color who've spoken tonight. We keep having the same conversation. Why? You know, why not do something? So one of the things that I have realized as I've been doing my own work to understand my whiteness, my identity as a white person and white supremacy, to be able to say the word white supremacy and understand even a little bit what that means and how pervasive it is that I finally am beginning to understand, my understanding is evolving about centering whiteness and what that means, how putting whiteness in the middle of everything eclipses efforts to truly be inclusive. It eclipses efforts to not discriminate, to not dehumanize. So the one thing I would ask of you is don't center whiteness in your decision on this issue. Leave it out. Because I can tell you right now, there are tons of people in this room who support this effort. You're going to hear from a lot of people who aren't here tonight who do not support this effort. Don't listen to them. You don't have to listen to them. If you know you are on the right side of history, and all of us here who have spoken so far really truly believe that you are, be brave, don't be afraid, and don't center whiteness. Thank you.
Ann Brown.
I am a white parent of 2 white children and a parent at Kingsley Elementary School, where I co-facilitate a group called Kingsley Parent Conversations About Race, which was developed in concert with and inspired by much of the work by other folks at other schools across the district. I participated in Beyond Diversity here and in the SEED program and have really appreciated all of that learning. I am still learning. Part of my urgency in restarting some sort of courageous conversations at Kingsley was my own experience as a kid, a white kid, in a diverse school system that didn't talk about race. And I made a very hurtful comment to a black friend as a third grader. And so part of and I was recently talking about this and someone asked me, well, did your parents teach you that? No, my parents were like wonderful, progressive folks, but we didn't talk about race enough at home. So I had an incomplete understanding of the things I knew about slavery and from the culture. And I don't want that to be repeated. I think we need to talk to our kids and teach our kids about race and racism. Someone mentioned tonight the social justice standards from Teaching Tolerance, K-12 standards. I have wondered if that is something that we could incorporate into the schools, because it's not enough for those of us who know we need to be talking about race with our kids to do it in our homes. We need to do more in our classrooms to prevent kids from making the kind of hateful statements that have been made recently in our schools. I also want to underscore and echo the comments made by Sergio Hernandez about developing very clear protocols, staff training, and ways to respond, and of other parents who have commented about things like, how do we make sure that the training that we're giving our staff is transferring back into the classroom? So I think this district has done a lot of good, and I appreciate the steps that you are taking, and we have a ways to go. Thank you.
Ndona Mubayagi.
Good evening, everyone. So my name is Ndona Mubuyai, and I'd just like to preface my statements to let everyone know that I'm the current and new president of the Bilingual Parent Advisory Committee here at District 65. And it's a bit difficult for me to have this conversation, mainly because I grew up in Evanston from a family that's been here over 200, close to 250 years. And I didn't experience a lot of what's taking place now. And it had a lot to do with the fact that my family had been here for a very long time. They worked with, went to school with, and did business with a lot of the white families here in Evanston for many years. All of that being said, I have encountered a number of very uncomfortable situations in multiple schools in District 65 since I've been back in Evanston, and I've only been here since September, and I left here in '94 to move to New York City and eventually Canada. And this is the most divisive environment that I've lived in the past 20 years in such a short period of time. I do think back and I remember that there were some instances where children that, when I was growing up, that spoke Spanish, or children that came from different countries that had different accents or weren't the typical Evanstonian child, were marginalized when I was growing up. But not to the extent that it is now, where now there is what I've seen, and it's actually even happened to me personally, where there is an actual conscious decision to exclude parents of color. I am currently involved in SEED. I'm currently working with a number of parents and students, and the feedback that I have received, not just from parents of color, but some white parents who are fairly new to Evanston, is that, let me try and put it nicely, the black parents don't want to be involved. The Hispanic parents don't want to be involved. They really don't care. And if I heard it from maybe 1, 2, or 3 people, I'd say, okay, maybe. And after I heard it, and because it was stated previously that we're not supposed to mention anyone's names that work for District 65, I won't do that. But what I will say is that my son is at ETHS. He's doing very well, happens to be the only black student in many of his AP and honors classes. My daughter is at Haven. I have joined multiple parent groups. I have reached out to all of my friends and family, and I'm just going to end it right here. And I reached out to many Spanish-speaking parents and black parents who I was told did not want to be involved in the PTA. And as soon as I recruited them, the website went down for over a month. And I went back and forth with emails and phone calls, even showing up at the school, stating that I have recruited minority parents to get involved in the PTA and the education of their children. And nothing was done. So.
Thank you. And I apologize for mispronouncing your last name. Albert Gibbs.
Good evening. My name is Albert Gibbs. I am a product of District 65 and 202, born and raised in Evanston. I read earlier where I think the title or the topic to this is called, tell me if I'm wrong, it's called Making District 65 an Anti-Racist Space to Create Emotional Safety for All Students. And I think to myself, well, something else I read that spoke to the character of an organization is reflected in its commitment to its community. And then I thought, well, any value of a community or humane society is the treatment of the least of them, that which is at the lower of the rung of the ladder. If you're big or you think you're something at the top, well, the way you treat the bottom says an awful lot about you. Says an awful lot about you. Underrepresentation. I always thought that schools were to be institutions of higher learning. That is, from elementary to college and behind. I've been recognizing that this gathering here, this topic tonight, tells me how wrong my thinking of equal education for all students has and maybe still is out of line. Example, I can say where 10 or so years ago, I would go to a relative's school to see her in different performances during the day, to support her. Timber Ridge was the school. I remember when I wasn't welcome over in there. Wasn't because I violated anything. I was just the wrong color. And watching the educators deal with the students as they came out of the assembly after the performance, going back to their rooms, I couldn't help but notice how the white teachers had a way of speaking to the children of color that I didn't see them offer to the same people that she were. And when she saw that I was watching her, because the little black kid, he felt like a penny with a hole in it. She was adding. But yet, she showed a loving disposition to the other little white kids. And when she saw me looking at her, all of a sudden her demonstration changed. Well, that reminded me of when I was in school. I can recall where, as a sophomore, beginning my sophomore year, all of the black students at Evanston Township High School, we walked out of the school in protest to the racist, discriminatory treatment that we received from the white teachers and the administration. It's pathetic to see that this is still happening now. It's pathetic. You say that you're listening. I'll be one moment. I think we need to establish an elementary school in the 5th Ward. Return the bused black children home. That would eliminate a lot of your administrative problems. I spoke on this a year or two ago here. Well, I should say when we sought a referendum to have it put on a referendum. I recognize that you can listen, as you tend to be doing, but listening is one thing, taking action is another, and I'll close on this. How do you recognize that maybe you're racist? Think about that. Well, I'll tell you how. If you see it as a white person, you hear it in your house, at your job, in the supermarket, on the streets, and you say nothing about it. You don't stand up and say, stop it. Cease this madness. You are perpetrating a fraud here tonight because it is going on. You're not trying to stop it. You pretend in front of people you're concerned, but I bet you $1 to the donut you won't do anything about stopping it. And you can. You have the power. And yet you pretend like it's above anything more than just a conversation. Do the right thing. Quit playing.
Thank you. Olivia Olson.
Hello, my name's Olivia Olson. I'm a 6th grader at Haven Middle School, and I just started there this year. I'm biracial. My mom is white, my dad is black. And as a student at Haven, I've noticed that there are no black t-shirts, first. And second, I've also noticed that it's very segregated. At lunch, I sit with my friends at a table, and I've looked around, and I noticed that most of the white students sit at separate tables with their friends, and the black students are sitting totally separate. And I believe that's why there's some of the segregation in Evanston. I've lived here my entire life, and right now, I notice that there's mostly adults in the room, and we're all talking about students and affects their daily life. So I think that we should have more students talking about this topic instead of adults.
Thank you. Meg Crewley?
Yeah, I don't know how to follow that at all. So, pardon me. Sorry. Hi, everybody.
My name is Meg Crewley. I live at 1425 Church Street in Evanston. I'm a white educator who was born here in Evanston and am a product of Evanston schools. I also raised 2 biracial children in District 65, children that have had to navigate some of the similar issues to those have been illuminated here tonight. Tonight, I'm speaking as the president of the District 65 Educators Council, representing 750 educators in our district. And I believe our educators, though they may struggle at times, are working diligently in this fight for anti-racist schools. Educators began the year being trained in Beyond Diversity and culturally responsive pedagogy. Both help support the ways in which we talk about race and equity, as well as elevate our ability to teach in racially conscious ways. We are dedicated to this hard work. Our educators are examining our own beliefs, challenging our experiences, and our own practices. Our educators are committed to this work, and while we may make mistakes along the way, DEC is all in for partnering within this essential work to bring these ideals into our classroom. Our educators are using responsive circles to help better understand differing perspectives, creating Black student unions, challenging systems and structures in our schools, improving libraries so that they are reflective of the diverse students we educate, working to find resources that align with our curricular content and put Black and brown students at the forefront of our curriculum. Some of these resources come from Teaching Tolerance, ADL, and other organizations that are working towards creating an anti-racist society. Participating in and facilitating SEED and SEED 2 groups, participating in racial affinity groups, encouraging the recruitment and retention of teachers of color. But we can do more. This work is ongoing, and our educators are committed to partnering with families and caregivers, administration, and the board in this essential anti-racist work to support our students. Our educators want all our students not just to feel accepted, but make sure that they are accepted wholly and fully. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Oliver, did you want to be the final speaker for the night?
There have been some very riveting and very powerful messages provided this evening, so I thank you for those of you who provided your messages. Good evening, Dr. Gorin, Board of Education members, district staff, and audience. In prelude to the district's presentation this evening, Opal would like to provide some questions for answering. Having the presence of the police in the building can be a community building image or a conflictual presence. There are some questions we'd like to ask regarding that or have addressed regarding that. How are they being utilized in the schools, and what impact does that have on our students, especially students of color? How do the officers know that the impact that they are having? Have they talked to the students, and in what context? What is the trauma or message being given to these students? How many times have the police been called on students in the district? And what is the racial makeup of the incidents? Is it necessary for them to be dressed in their uniforms in the elementary schools? If so, why? Are the police officers at all schools, and what determines what schools they go into? If they are not in all schools, what are the determining factors, and why are they assigned to the specific school? These are questions that require information to be unpacked and to have it clearly specified how the police are used and the resulting effects. Thank you, and this is a part of Opal, some of the questions that Opal wanted to have addressed. Thank you for allowing me to present.
Thank you. And again, my sincere thank you to everyone who is here tonight, to everyone who spoke. Your words were powerful and will be in all of our minds as we continue the discussion of this topic. So with that, I turn it to Dr. Gordon.
And as we prepare the next part of the presentation, I hope that as many of you can stay so that we can continue listening and learning from each other. I had a bunch of prepared remarks, but I'm putting them aside. I want to first say thank you. I want to thank each and every voice who came forward. I want to especially give another high five to Olivia. And I'm going to... If we fast forward to the end of this presentation that we're about to have, we're going to say that this is not a one and done conversation. We're going to continue on. We're going to continue on with 2 community conversations in the new year. And Olivia, I want to make a promise that we're going to work and harvest student voice. And we'll actually start with you to help us out from Haven, and my time is up, obviously. But we will actually look to the other middle schools and our elementary schools, because the voice of students is so vital, as is the voice of residents, as is the voice of community members. I want to say something, and I don't want to be disrespectful to the person who said this is the same conversation, because in some ways this is the same conversation. I've lived here for 20 years. I've lived in South Evanston for 20 years, and the same types of dialogues that have been going on continue to go on. Where I see this as different is that in the past we would take incidences of racial slurs, of racial discrimination, and we would, as a district, sweep it under the carpet. Kids will be kids. It just happens. I can ignore that. And my statement, I want to be clear, is we will not ignore it anymore. My statement, and I want to be clear, is that as a white person, I will take the lead in not ignoring that anymore. That's why we're here tonight, that's why we're engaging, and that's why we're doing everything we can to learn. The second thing is that, as I said in my comments earlier, the changes that have to happen, and what each of you have said, explicitly or implicitly, is urgently, promptly, now. Don't let anything happen but responding to it now. Happens at the individual level. It happens at the individual level on how we do the work that is necessary to understand issues around race and racism and how we unpack that. As a white person, it's how we unpack whiteness and how we're actually frank about it and understanding, and how, at least for me as a white person, how I listen and learn and move forward. That's the work that we've done through Beyond Diversity. That's the work that we've done through SEED. That's the continued work that we'll do in the district. And again, when I landed here, I heard the same messages. Beyond Diversity would never happen in this district. We now have close to 800 people who are trained in Beyond Diversity. We have multiple SEED cohorts. All of that is necessary, but it's not sufficient unless we do something. The individual focus is really important. The institutional focus is as important. What are we going to do in terms of our policies, our practices, our hiring practices, our curriculum? Yes, we do use teaching tolerance. Yes, we do use the wide range of tools out there. Do we use it enough? No. Can we use it more? Yes. Do we have restorative practices? Yes. Joaquin will talk about some of this as we move forward. But the institutional changes, pushed by this board, supported by the senior team here, engaged by our principals, is where we have to go. We also have a community, 2 communities that we live in, Skokie and Evanston. And the environment of Skokie and Evanston, we will be a player. I will commit us to be a player as a school district, but this is also a conversation that needs to continue within our communities so that we can do the work that's really necessary. And I know, and I think it's just absolutely marvelous what the several parent groups have done throughout the different schools to be able to actually engage this conversation. This conversation cannot stop here. It has to continue. And I just want to, again, say from the bottom of my heart that I am appreciative of the voice, but appreciation only goes so far. Urgency and prompt response is where we will actually make a difference. With that, I want to turn to Joaquin Stevenson, who is our Director of Equity and Parent and Community Engagement, who will help with my colleagues and me lead a conversation about the work that we have underway and the work that has to continue. as we move forward to create support for anti-racist schools and anti-racist communities.
Thank you, Dr. Gorin. Thank you, board, administration, community. I can see I'm in the right place. I'm just so blessed and welcome to be here today. I believe that everything happens for a reason based on my belief system, and I believe I'm here today for a specific purpose. Thank you for taking a chance on me, on my hire. In my 12th week, as I give this presentation, I am not an Evanstonian. I'm from Humboldt Park, Logan Square, and I'm proud of that. But the racial impacts that I see in my community, I see in my community that I serve here today. So we're going to talk about that as we're talking about creative support for anti-racist schools and communities. Before I start, I just want to say thank you for the narratives, pain shared in this community today, in this space. We're never going to be at the same place at the same time ever again. And this is truly a place of a start of reconciliation, but that cannot be without truth. So in speaking to that, we must continue to be open and explicit about what is happening in our schools related to discrimination based on our student multiple identities. And as our board member spoke of before, of the multiple identities that we navigate with, me being a brown, cisgender, Mexican-American male, and all of that beauty that comes with that, as my mama says, we must keep race at the center in this conversation. Race is what we've been socialized to recognize first. You can't see my religion. You can't see my sexual orientation, nor that of our students. You can't see my religion if I'm not wearing something that's tangible, like kippah, a hijab, a burqa. You can't see my social class. You can't see my gender expression if it's out of the gender binary that's been socialized for all of us to understand what that looks like. You can't see that in me. What you see is my race. You see brown, you see a culturally ambiguous presenting man that looks like Jafar from Aladdin. But that being said, race is noticed first. And my 6 friends that are CPD officers have their own struggles. But one of the first things they ask is, what did the assailant look like? What was their race? And society has taught us to recognize that first. So let us not deny the fact that we don't see race in our community. You see it. We all see it. Typically, issues are placed under a rock, but do not move us forward in D65. Or as we continue to move forward, we need to make sure that we allow that rock to be lifted. And so a metaphor, so bear with me today, because I try to consolidate this understanding in a way that is understanding for me and the students I serve. So typically in our society, we have a large range of systems, right? So social, political, educational systems that operate in keeping issues of racial discrimination under a rock. So you have this rock, right? And these different pieces of discrimination based on race keep happening, right? Placed under the rock, placed under the rock, placed under the rock. Think of the rock as a people or marginalized people or persons, or person. And so that rock, as situations of racial discrimination keep being put under that rock starts to lift and the exposure happens, right? So then what happens is the institution pushes that rock down into the dirt to not allow that exposure to take place. But the incidences keep piling up. And so the pressure of that rock starts to build. And then the rock explodes eventually. And the system gets hit by pieces of the rock. And they blame the rock for that explosion. What District 65 is moving towards is the lifting of that to make sure that we as an administrative group, administrative body, are modeling what it is to the exposure of racial discrimination happening to our schools and our babies. With that truth, it's important for us to understand as a Beyond Diversity affiliate and presenter and seed trainer, for us to understand the difference between technical problems and adaptive solutions. So I'm going to read this. So leadership would be an easy and safe undertaking if organizations such as schools and communities only face problems for which they already knew the solutions. Every day, people have problems for which they do, in fact, have the necessary know-how and procedures. We call these technical problems. But there's a whole list of other problems that are not amendable to authoritative expertise or standard operating procedures. They cannot be solved by someone who provides and answers from up high. We call these adaptive challenges because they require new experiments, new discoveries, and adjustments from numerous places in organization, classroom, or school. This is the difference between adapted and technical. As Ron Heifetz says in his explanation, and the adapter of this adaptive model, in an adaptive challenge, you can't take the problem off their shoulders and give them the solution. They have to do their part. In an adaptive challenge, people are part of the problem, and their ownership and responsibility taking of the problem becomes part of the solution itself. That's the recognition that every adult in the institution understands that we are all part of the problem, but yet we are also a part of the solution itself. Adaptive versus technical. And so in this adaptive piece, as Meg pointed out earlier, is that we're building capacity for every single adult in this district to be able to have conversations about race and what that looks like in practice in their everyday lives. But that happens only first when there's an introspection about what and how racism has impacted me as an adult. First, unpack that for myself so I can better serve my kids. And so in those continuous action steps towards an anti-racist culture, the first piece is developing culture-responsive pedagogy and engaging in curriculum review. So, as a Mexican-American male, I didn't see anything related to my cultural identity until Dr. Chris Manning at Loyola University in my doctoral studies as a black male allowed me to see myself in reading the book Mexican Lives. Thank you, Dr. Manning, if you're watching. Developing culture-responsive practice and pedagogy is a curriculum review that has started, but this takes work in building capacity. As it does with restorative practices, as it does with D-tracking related to Algebra 8 and Algebra 1 for all students which now are completely detracked with our offerings. The new discipline code, discipline policies, school-based climate teams, district equity leadership team who use the Race Forward racial impact assessment to filter through the new discipline and dress code, and our administration being open to that incredible feedback from educators that have a heightened sense of racial and cultural competency. District-wide equity statement and equity policy of May of 2017 with the consultant work of Corey Wallace, and equity professional development. So with this professional development and the continuation steps that we take related to moving towards this anti-racist culture, you or me, I could say I'm not racist. But that does nothing. Anti-racism is me moving towards action and all of us moving towards action. Right? And so, at opening day, Dr. Darnise Amante, I'm from 219, I'm now family of District 65. We also had Dr. Amante speak at Niles West, just an incredible spirit and educator nationally. Left great messages for our staff. Beyond diversity, we've trained over 1,000 people so far. We have about 500 left as far as every single adult in the district. And so, those of you who don't know, is Beyond Diversity is a race-based professional development. So it centers on ensuring racial equity transformation. And so what the workshop does, and being an affiliate of that, is it teaches our staff tools of how to navigate conversations about race using the compass, the 4 agreements, and 6 conditions. So if I want to internalize a specific piece, and I could ask members of the audience or us here at this board about how often do you use gender pronouns and how often does that internalize for you, right? So me, as a straight male, that took a while for me to internalize and understand. But if I didn't understand how to use gender pronouns, that's my work that I have to make sure I do. Just like it's every adult's work in this district to make sure they internalize a protocol of having conversations about race. But it doesn't happen unless you use it. So Beyond Diversity is an intersection, an avenue for all of our adults in the institution to be able to step in and engage, and from that point, the work is their own. and how we can obviously continue to model different other learning experiences like SEED, Seeking Educational Equity and Diversity. We have 6 cohorts currently taking place, 320 people will be finished being trained. We have 2 cohorts with parents, just an incredible workshop and going through the isms, modeling pedagogy in a classroom related to the isms that exist in our society. The people in the class are the curriculum. Our facilitators are doing an amazing job. ASAAC, formerly known as MSAN, district-wide staff racial affinity groups. This is something that's been offered by the district. Unfortunately, it has not been well attended. Now, this is offered for every single adult. We have 5 sessions left. It's being facilitated by Corey Wallace and Kim Kelly. And so it's important that all of us are taking the opportunity to be able to understand what it means for us in racial affinity to be able to dive deep. For our white family members, it's important that you understand what it is to be white. Understand white racial identity development. So in that development, understanding of what that is, you're not leaning on people of color to do the work for you, nor are you overburdening them in the process. So that's why the space is provided. And for people of color, you're able to operate, express, and to be in a sense in a place of community, not having to worry about taking care of the white other, because the systems of power and dynamics do happen in a place of that conversation with white people and people of color in the same place. That's why with the affinity space, you're able to get deeper, faster, and then come together more genuinely with that space. Our Cultivating Consciousness principle trainings, which are being done with the leadership of Andalib Kalgadi and also Corey Wallace. Coming soon is our White Racial Identity Development for Administration for the spring of 2019. First time administrators are hearing about this right now, because we're still under development of what that looks like, but we feel like it's very important. Brought up the idea from Joyce Bart and Andalib about how to create a space for our administrators to be able to really unpack what it means for them to be allies in this work for this district. And then building level beyond diversity starting in 2019-2020, so that we do a revamping of beyond diversity at the building level to drive the work locally for the school. As we continue action steps forward, there's going to be 2 community circles for all of us to be able to engage in conversations and a healing process. And we invite all community members, all teachers, all of our wonderful children that we serve to be a part of these community sharing circles, so we can model the restorative practices that we are offering in schools. February 6th and the 27th from 6 to 8, I will make sure I send that information with the leadership of our board to make sure all of our community members have that information and location. I must admit that the parent commitments in this district are incredible in my perspective in doing this work in 2 other districts. So we're, Beyond Diversity for Parents will be offered in the spring. I have to give a shout out for our Haven Middle School parents for driving that and for us to offer this for all feeder schools. And so this will be open to everyone. Yes, Haven parents will try to give you priority because it was your idea. We want to make sure that everyone is involved. So thank you for that push. Seeking Educational Equity and Diversity, SEED, as I mentioned, there's 2 cohorts with parents. Courageous Conversation Series, PTA equity funding, the Transforming White Privilege that was mentioned from constituents from Dewey and King Arts, How to Talk to Your Kids About Race from Dewey parents, Evanston Cradle to Career, with their mission statement being focused on equity as well. Other parent-sponsored activities which are also mentioned today. So despite the best intentions, discussion about race, White Anti-Racist Book Group, Affinity Group, Family Action, FAN, the speaker series at 202 you have to go to. Dear Evanston, Racial Justice Book Clubs. And then the parent commitments that we have in moving towards anti-racist culture. There was a few parents that spoke about this earlier, related to what our white family members need to do in this community. It isn't enough to have conversations with your kids about race. It isn't enough. How do you live, love, laugh, and play in this community? And is it in racial segregation? Our actions are what our kids see. Margaret Hagerman, who is an incredible writer, and Time Magazine published her article on September 4, 2018, who for 2 years studied 30 affluent families in a Midwestern community. Research showed that a critical influential aspect of raising white kids in America is often overlooked. The social environments in which they grow up, white kids learn about race as a result of their own independent experiences. And I'm going to read a short excerpt, so bear with me, please. It's short. And Margaret says, based on her research, how white children learn about racism in America does not only happen during the interactions they have at school. Everyday behaviors of white parents also matter. When to lock the doors, what conversations to have at the dinner table, what books and magazines to have around the house, how to react to news headlines, who to invite over for summer cookouts, whether and how to answer questions posed by kids about race, who parents are friends with themselves, when to roll one's eyes, what media to consume, how to respond to overtly racist remarks made by grandpa at a family dinner party, and where to spend leisure time, restaurants, vacation destinations, community events, can be deliberately and by default mostly white, or purposefully not. These small actions are subtle, yet powerful messages. Parents may not even be aware of this, and that they're conveying ideas about race through these behaviors, but children learn from them all the time. In this sense, when it comes to communicating with white children about racism, parents' actions speak louder than their words. The conversations parents have with their white children about race and racism matter. It's not just that so does everything else parents do. Rather than focusing solely on what they say to their kids about race, white parents should think more critically and carefully about how they do and what they do on an everyday basis may actually reproduce the very racist ideas and forms of racial inequality that they say they seek to challenge. And so that's an excerpt from her research. I would also add, based on my lived experience, is my mom as a person of color had to do a hell of a lot of racial identity development for me as a person of color. And so this is a message to my community of color, my family. How are you reinforcing the solidification of foundation of a racial and cultural identity of our kids? And how is that reinforced by our teachers? But it starts at the home for our white families and families of color. Whatever our schools are not teaching, this is what my mom said, whatever the schools aren't teaching you, Joaquin, I'm going to make sure I fill in those gaps. Right? And we have to do this in concert with each other and about building capacity. We are working with people in an organization. This takes constant work. We were born, we grew up, and we live in a racist society. This will not happen overnight. This is adaptive work. And we are committed to do whatever it takes to make sure that we push forward in building capacity for our adults that serve our babies, not these kids, those kids, our kids every day. The community involvement, and I've been blessed to be able to meet the Reverend Dr. Neighbors and Aline Heinemann as we talk about the partnership of the NAACP, YMCA, Houses of Worship, and City of Evanston. Muchísimas gracias.
So as we segue into this part of the conversation, it's a great pleasure to have Reverend Neighbors and Ms. Heinemann here. And one of the questions that we'd like to start with as you reflect on what you've heard tonight and on thinking about how we move forward is the community question. How do we create the values of anti-racism, the principles of anti-racism in our communities as we do the same sort of work in our schools?
Good evening. I think I'll try to begin. I did prepare a couple of announcements, and I'm going to try to wrap what I prepared into a response to that question. Sure. And I want to start by saying I wonder if you all really know what you're asking. I wonder if you really understand the largesse of this monumental goal that you have of making this district and this community both anti-racist and anti-hatred. And I want to begin my statement by saying that it is a noble goal, but I think that it is unprecedented in that it has not occurred, to my knowledge, in any district or any community in the nation or the world. And so you're asking something that's really key and crucial. And I think that the key to this kind of conversation and the kind of goals and objectives that you have set really is going to establish for us how we talk about racism and hatred, not just within the school district, but within the community, and not just within the community, but within all of our individual families, all of our houses of worship. We're going to have to begin to talk about race when it comes to everybody in our city. That includes our elected officials, that includes our first responders, that includes our business owners, our company owners, our corporations, everybody that has anything to do with our community. If we're going to say that we have a school district that is anti-racist and we have a community that is anti-racist and anti-hatred, then that is going to include everybody. Certainly you are concerned because of where you're starting, but I do want to say that a discussion about anti-racism includes a discussion about homophobia. It includes a discussion about Islamophobia. It includes a discussion about anti-Semitism and every other kind of ism that exists out there as well. And so I think that what we've got to do is we've got to begin by building relationships, by developing bridges between races and ethnicities that are not just professional, such as schools and businesses and companies and city issues, but those relationships must also be personal. How do you get parents to begin to talk to each other? How do you get parents to begin to talk to each other that are of different backgrounds and different ethnicities as well? Since racism and hatred are taught, I think that we need to understand it falls upon the community, it falls upon all of those organizations that we talked about already to begin to teach an alternative. We are inextricably intertwined and caught up in a mutual web of interdependence as a community. And I think that the rich mosaic of the human family is something that is cause for celebration. So I put all of that aside and I say, this is what we have to do. So this is the plan. So it needs to be manipulated because it can't just be my plan, right? But these are ideas that I just want to begin with. The plan must include the following steps. It's major, you all, what you're trying to do. Identify racism as a critical epidemic occurring in our community. Take ownership of it. Don't just say, oh, America's always had a problem with race. That's an outlet for you. No, admit that it is an epidemic that is occurring in this community. Number two, if a racist act or words are done or spoken, go immediately to the authorities, whoever that is. In schools, it would be teachers and or administrators. On your job, it would be your supervisor or owner. In public services, it might be a manager, a supervisor. In public spaces, it would be the police. Number three, if a racist act or words happens on your job, address it immediately. Number four, if racism occurs in your neighborhood, contact your neighborhood association to address it. Number five, cite racism as a moral issue that demeans and devalues human beings. Number six, demand that public institutions be held. I've got a copy for this, y'all. You don't have to write it all down. Number six, demand that public institutions be held accountable and offer a plan of action that penalizes those institutions who fail to address and resolve this specific issue. This is the big one, I think. Number seven, have our town adopt an anti-racist, anti-hate zone all of Evanston, all 8 square miles, with appropriate signage placed throughout the community, followed by programs and workshops. Number 8, become a change agent for ending racism and hate crimes in our schools and in our towns. Number 9, whatever you belong to, ask your house of worship, your social club, your business, your fraternity, your sorority, your school to become change agents. And number 10, ensure that it begins with you.
I hate following a preacher. So the thing that we haven't talked about that much tonight is power. This conversation has to include the word power, starting with the youngest students who have power, going to the person who's lived here the longest and people who arrived yesterday. Who has the power to roll their eyes after this conversation? Who has the power to talk tomorrow morning about something they heard here in either a way that will demean the amazing, vulnerable, powerful stories that people shared, or the power to tell what they heard tonight in a way that allows them to become those change agents? If we don't talk about power and its use and its misuse, we're not addressing a core piece of this. A child who feels like they can make some of the remarks that have been made feels power. And they created some kind of response. And if the response they create is one that makes them feel more powerful, then that's bad on us. So we have to think about how people use their power, and what's my power as an adult in this community? What's the power of YWCA to champion the work that you're doing in a way that says, yeah, you're not done, neither are we. Our sign out in front says eliminating racism. Talk about a goal that is pretty lofty. Yeah, we're not there, and we've been working on it for about 90 years. So we can either beat ourselves up about it, or we can say, how do we individually and collectively use our power to create the change? So I loved the steps that Joaquin outlined about what's already happening. And, not but, and I love the ideas that were shared tonight from people who have lived this, every form of abuse that we heard, and have been disempowered, some of them, and have been empowered sometimes by their anger or pain. And how do we take that sense of empowerment, where we're centering the voices of those who have been marginalized? That's got to start each of these conversations. How do we center that voice and empower the changes that are being sought from those voices? We can create a million policies. If we have not included the realities of what our kids and parents are experiencing, it's not going to change anything. It's going to be another one of those lists that we've made. And so centering that pain and centering that reality has got to be the leading issue here, whether it's curriculum, every aspect that we've talked about. And utilizing your power as a board to say, how do we move those people who are in the way of progress? So what does that mean? That means when I, as a community partner, am not doing the thing that our organization can do to support you, or not providing some of the workshops that you need, move me. You push me, because that's what you said you wanted to do. You want all of us to be empowered to make this change. When Reverend Neighbors and I, as community partners, propose something, support it. Encourage people to be part of the things that are going to create change. But if it's just us talking about it, we're sitting in our place of power. I have a title, I have a job, he has a huge title, a huge job.
Same.
if we're not talking to people who have been impacted by the stories that we heard tonight, it doesn't give an ounce of matter what we decide. And so change the way we think about how we move forward. Moving forward with being led by Olivia and all of her classmates. Move forward being led by people who entrust their kids to us as a community, and we're failing them when we don't support those who have been marginalized and teach those who have been marginalizing them. We can sit and blame parents, parents' fault, it's teachers' fault, it's this, it doesn't matter. Our role now is to say, what do we do with what is? And we say, this is not okay, ever. And that has to be consistent. It can't be that it's not okay at this school, but it's kind of okay at that school. It can't be one administrator lifts up the truth and opens it. And I loved your image of the rock. You know, just went and took the rock out of the way, didn't wait. Move the rock, tell the truth, and then we can start to heal. Everybody has to do the same thing. If this is one system, then every school has to respond the same way. Every kid has to know they will be listened to in the same way.
I want to add that putting a face to the issue of racism and hatred is very, very important. And I think it's not just important for those who are educators, but it's important for people that are willing to begin to engage in meaningful dialogue. We talked about the courageous conversations that have been going on. And I think that a lot of times, African Americans, we're in this situation, I heard someone say it earlier, I think it was Roger, we're always in a situation where, you know, whenever we talk about race, it's like we become the teacher. And not just the student, and people expect that from us, and they expect that from our kids as well. So sometimes when our kids are in the classroom talking about race, they almost become a second teacher, especially like what we've heard earlier, if they're the only black child in the classroom. You know, so the sentiment is, now how do your people really feel about that? You know, and that's too much pressure. It's too much of a burden for anybody at any age. But I think putting a face on it is very important. My kids caught me, I guess it's probably about a year ago, but it was very, very interesting. We were going somewhere on vacation, and so I always, you know, dress up. And my kids are always like, well, Dad, my God, why do you have to wear a tie all the time? Or a jacket? And even when we go on vacation, when we get on the flight, you know, I am in a jacket and tie. You know, it's probably a suit, but at least a jacket and tie. And so I finally had to sit down and talk to my kids, my 14-year-old son and my 9-year-old daughter. And I said, listen, the reason why I do it is because I'm a black man. And I'm a black man, I'm kind of volatile and opinionated. And
really?
so I am indeed. And so if somebody approaches me because they suspect that they can talk to me any way they want to talk to me, or say something that's really going to be outlandish, I don't know how to respond. So I wear a suit and tie to protect you, because with a suit and tie on, 90% of the time, I am completely respected, just like everybody else, whether it's in an airport or whether it's here or there. If I have my hoodie on, or if I have a t-shirt and blue jeans, people don't know me from blue, and they may treat me in a way that's just completely unacceptable. Now, you all know that's insane. Isn't that insane? My God, we were going to Cuba, man. It was 112 degrees. But to tell that story, it's just one of 1,000 stories that we need to share so that people can understand how this issue of race is so pernicious and so ingrained in every single aspect of our community and of our society and the way that we live. And unless we begin to talk about it, like you all have decided you're going to talk about it, you all are the ones who invited us here and said we're going to have an anti-racist school and an anti-racist community. And that's why I still think that it's probably one of the most amazing goals that I've ever heard anybody make. Who came up with that? Yeah, I want to know who came up with it.
I did.
It's a well, Anya, that is a vision. And I want you to know you have 110% of my support in trying to make that happen. Yes, indeed.
A really important thing that I heard tonight was about vocabulary and creating a unified vocabulary, something that we've been working with right now with the city of Evanston so that we can start to share some definitions so that people feel a little bit more comfortable having the conversation. I think being upfront about that and being upfront about what's the point of that? Why, as each step happens, what's the point? Why are we doing this? So that people the community starts to understand. Because it's really important that people in the community who say, oh, they're never going to change anything, they this, they're never, but all of those things that we say, the rug gets pulled out from underneath those kinds of statements when there's incredible transparency. And when people are being told, oh, they've invited actual parents to tell their stories and they're responding to that. Oh, they talked about actual things that have happened in school and they're talking about what's the training that needs to happen so that doesn't happen again. That starts to change the community mentality, and then we have to start owning ways to support what you're doing. And by we, I mean everybody. Every organization, whatever it is in Evanston has to be able to say, what can I do so that no 6-year-old in Evanston ever has to be talked to in the ways we heard tonight. What's my role? I don't have anything to do with the schools, but what can I do to support what you're doing? And part of it is speaking up, and I have to be a person that pulls the rug out from underneath people who are trying to denigrate the work you're doing. And I know, I loved Ginevra's notion of just don't listen to those people that disagree. I was a school administrator for a long time. I know you have to listen. On the other hand, if we have the language to say, here's why we're doing this, here's why, thank you for sharing what you're saying, but here's why we're going to keep going right in the direction that we've set. You may not change minds, you may grab a few people who didn't understand along the way, but the language that you share with each other is going to give you the power to just keep responding as you keep moving. And I think that's really important. And we want to support you in being able to do that.
And what y'all have to do since you've started this is you have to openly and publicly declare war on racism and hatred in this school system. You have to declare war. You do. And you are going to get some pushback from that, but you have to believe that racism and hatred is absolutely antithetical to what beloved community is all about. They do not belong in the kind of community that we believe Evanston can be. And that's what we're working toward. So we always talk about racism in terms of its history. We always talk about racism in terms of how it has been a part of our society before, but I don't know that there's ever been any public declaration that in this community and in this location and in this school district, we are declaring war on racism and we are going to fight for its complete eradication from our community and from our district. You know, you have to believe that. And because that's the way that you press forward. Now that doesn't mean you're declaring war on people. Okay. Let me make it plain. But you're declaring war on those systems and upon those organizations and upon those systemic realities that continue to allow racism to fester and to grow. So you're not declaring war on individuals, but you're declaring war on that system. And if they are the ones that are feeding into that system, then you're cutting off the feeder. They will no longer be able to feed into that kind of system. And we all have that. Again, it's not just the district. You're not alone in this. It's in our entire community and it's in our entire city, in our entire nation. But who says that out of Evanston cannot somehow exists the seed for finally allowing our nation to wake up and recognize we have fussed with this reality of racism for so long as a nation. Now it's time to eradicate it. Now it's time to declare war. You declared war on poverty, you declared war on drugs, you've declared war on every little thing, but nobody's declared war on racism. It is evil and it is wrong, and it needs to be eliminated.
Very powerful words, and I guess I will open it to board members to bring questions, comments. Joey, do you want to start?
Well, you're gonna take me to church one day. The stories we heard tonight. I mean, I've lived in this town for 33 years. I went to these schools, and I remember as a student at Chute, the day I was having trouble at school, and my parents went to meet with Mr. Pate, the principal, and the respect he got as the principal from my parents, my white parents, and listening to my dad talk about how awesome it was to hear of that black man talking about how he was going to protect his baby at school. Not racial issues that I was having, but there was a racial moment with my white, relatively conservative father meeting with the black principal of the school. Mm-hmm. Come to think of it, I've only had black principals all my school career, Mr. Johnson at Walker.
Wow.
And that's unique. And I love that Mr. Johnson's face is embronzed on the wall at my kid's school. Mm-hmm. I also remember when I was at Chute before school, we'd skip over to the Asbury Street Market. And my black friends would have to leave their bags at the door as we went in to get our colas before school. I didn't have to leave my bag. So this is not new. Like everybody said, this has been around a long time. We heard a lot of references to teaching tolerance, materials and standards for social emotional learning, and to everybody's point, great resources exist, and yet to make it a moral issue, as you suggest, dare I say demand, tolerance is just not enough. And while I respect the organization and I love the materials, the name is wrong.
Yeah, that's right.
So I love to see where the path forward is. My compass has me thinking and feeling and recognizing that I'm a white man that can sit at a board table in a sweatshirt. I get that. I recognize that every day. And I love to see where the path forward lies. With an elected body of people that don't look like me, I think that's impressive for our community. With a cabinet and educational leadership team that also doesn't look like me, I think that's an opportunity. So I look forward to see where we go as a group, and I think as an individual, I'm definitely game for that war.
Thank you. Anybody else? Rebecca?
Yeah, it's interesting because I didn't go to work today, and so I have my yoga pants on and just loungewear, but on my way here, I had my gym shoes on. And I said, if I show up in my gym shoes, like, people aren't going to take me seriously, you know, like, I'm going to be judged by how I dress. Mm-hmm. And as a Latina, how I carry myself and how I dress in public, it's something that is an added layer to my everyday. And then I sat down next to Joey and I saw you in your gym shoes. So, I think, and I've already said this before, we need to start tracking the incidences. Reverend, it's not going to go away. But I think if we're able to track the times that this is happening in our district, it equips us to see those gaps at our schools, to provide support to our educators, to provide support to our community members. And it's just as serious as somebody getting into a fight. It's just as serious as somebody, this is an offense. It's not a physical offense, but the emotional baggage and trauma that this is causing is really a humongous burden for our children to carry. And we're the type of community that is talking about it. And I hope that in 20 years, we're not still talking about it, because it's exhausting. And the people of color in this community are exhausted. And people who live in this community, we're all immigrants in Evanston. We all came here and made choices because of the beautiful environment, you know, that's next to Lake Michigan, houses that, you know, people feel safe, an incredible educational system. And I hope that, again, that we can start tracking these incidences, and that through the collection of information on how we're responding, and that every school is responding the same way, and that every school has the resources to make kids feel safe in every possible way, physically, emotionally. It's important.
Thank you. Anya. So why ask for such a big question? What prompted me to ask us to have this discussion was a sense of connection to the experience of being a child who was underestimated and who was excluded and who was called awful things and made to feel that the adults around me were complicit. And I was a child that also could take a standardized test and be in the 99th percentile, but I was always treated as if I was unimportant. And I felt like I had to fight for everything that I was able to achieve, still with no recognition or appreciation for what it was taking, or for the harm and the toll that respectability politics put on our souls, to feel like we have to perform in some way in order to be safe or accepted. And the idea of having to have survived that myself, I felt like I'm okay with that. But to ask children to do that, it felt like too much. And so, not expecting that we could absolutely attain this in a short period of time, I asked that we have this discussion because I think children deserve to hear us placing their experience at a high level of importance. And they deserve to see that the adults that are charged with educating them, that we will try. They deserve for us to try, for us to validate, hear, and see them, and tell them that they're important enough to protect and elevate and love. So I charged us with having this conversation, and I believe that having this conversation and sparking people with the opportunity, I guess, and the inspiration to share their stories in a way that they were empowered, not pleading for change, but demanding change and expecting change for us. I felt like that was an important exercise for us as an institution, but for us as a community. We as a community need to think differently about who we need to listen to and who we don't, right? Who has to plead for change and who gets to demand it? Everybody. And we need to respond to the pain and suffering that is happening the way that we would, right? If the way that our institutions in our community have historically to whiteness and wealthiness. Like the reason why our community looks the way it does is because we have not listened. We have not listened, we have not responded, we have not get elevated or empathized with the deep trauma and pain that has been experienced. And, you know, it brings adults to tears. How can we expect children to learn if they are burdened with this pain? So I felt like we needed to have this discussion, and I'm really grateful that we have the support of our community to do this. And we need healing. Our adults and our children need healing. It's healing for me to see this institution respond and validate the experience of the terror that many people who are marginalized feel. That's a heavy burden, and we need for our institutions to acknowledge that burden that we're carrying on behalf of really our entire country, right? Every time we experience a microaggression and we put on our respectability politics to try to protect ourselves in some way, that keeps peace for other people.
Right.
And that is a heavy burden for all folks who are marginalized to carry, and that we're passing on to our children. And then we're asking them to learn and be pro-social and joyful while they carry these heavy, heavy burdens. To the point of what Ms. Shepherd was talking about, her children standing outside in the cold. I mean, they were dehumanized so much that they wanted to harm the humanity of someone else. And none of us want to be in that place. And I think that the only way we can make sure we're not putting anyone in the place of feeling so angry that they feel like the only thing they can do is lash out is taking responsibility and validating and acknowledging what people are experiencing. And I, as a Black woman who's an elected official, I have not been immune to having experienced feelings of racism and microaggressions. I've been accused multiple times of not living in my neighborhood in front of my own home. Had people otherize me in so many different situations, constantly asking me if I'm the nanny of my own children, and asking my other friends who are parents of color if they are nannies of their children, only because folks see a woman of color who is at home with her children and assume that I must be working, that I can't actually have the opportunity to, and the wherewithal to be home with my children. Those experiences are painful, and it's painful to experience that in front of my children. It feels like an indignity to be forced out of my parental role into, right, a feeling space. I feel like oftentimes I have to tout my accomplishments or my degrees in order to get people to listen to me. Or I had to teach my daughter about African American vernacular, because oftentimes that's not how I talk, but then if I'm with my friend, I might slip into my African American vernacular English, and she's like, "Mom, why did you talk like that?" And that's how I feel comfortable talking. That's how I feel comfortable relating and having fun. I should be able to be that person all of the time.
Right.
So I'm glad that we're having this conversation, and I understand that for some people it's uncomfortable, but for me, it's really sharing a little bit of the discomfort, I guess. I have to feel uncomfortable a lot as a Black woman. I have to code switch a lot, and this is an opportunity for everyone to think about the comfort that they are getting to experience on behalf of folks who are carrying a lot of discomfort. And children deserve to go to school and feel fully alive and feel fully present and fully loved. And if we as adults have to get a little uncomfortable in order to do that, then I expect that we do it.
Thank you. I just have two quick comments, and the first is really, I just want to remind everyone that the system is part of the problem, and it feels weird to be talking about solutions to this horrible problem in the context of the system that we're currently in. It just seems very, very big and daunting when we think about that. I just want to push the organization to think beyond the current system that we're in, to try to find solutions to this. The other comment that I want to make is just really another push on how we prioritize this effort and what needs to be taken off of the plate in order to make this an actual priority so that we listen and we do, because it's obviously incredibly important.
Thank you.
I just wanted to reiterate one of the points that I've heard many times, because there's several here that, but one in particular, Rebecca talked about tracking incidents, but we also talked a lot about how do we know when the work that we're doing through our training and our capacity building is translating into change in the classroom. And I don't yet have a clear picture of how we know that and how we're going to hold ourselves accountable for that. And so I would put that back to the team, the administration team, on, what does that look like? Obviously this happens over time, but we need to understand how we can hold ourselves accountable so that we know when things are changing and we know if they're not, and we have to course correct and we can move the obstacles out of the way. And so, that's a very thinking thing right now, but it's something that I still feel is really ambiguous. I don't feel like I understand how that's going to come about. And so, clearly, if our children feel more valued and all feel valued, that will be a change, but I feel like there has to, something in between there, we have to have a sense. So, and then, I told my daughter, she said I could talk about this. I was talking at home about this conversation, and I have one daughter who's now in 7th grade, but this happened and she was in elementary school. My daughter's biracial, but she's Asian and Caucasian and Asian, and her very best friend was black. And she told me today, and she had not told me before, that they had done an experiment when she was in 3rd grade in her classroom because she and her friend had she thought they were being treated differently based on their behavior. And so there's this thing of getting up from the rug, and her friend, if she got up from the rug and went to do something, was told to go back to the rug. And my daughter decided that she was going to get up from the rug and go do something to see what the response would be. And it was different. There was no response, in fact. She just went and did what she was going to do, and she wasn't brought back. And that says to me that our children are so innately smart, and they want to be better than we are. They want to do better, and we have to help them do that. And I know she's not the only kid that would do that, right? There are many others. And so and I didn't have a good way to have that discussion with her at home about what do we do now? What do I, as someone who supposedly has power, do about this? What should I do to step in? And so it's a journey that I do think we need to help our kids, but we need our kids to help us, too. So thank you, and thank you, Anya, for pushing this and making this conversation happen. Appreciate it.
I'll just add that this is such an important conversation, and this is something that is an extremely ambitious goal, and not something that we are going to see happening anytime soon. We're not going to achieve anti-racist schools all of a sudden by the next school year. But while I appreciate all of the efforts that we have put in place now, and realize that it will take some time to see the effects of them, but I do also believe that we have to put in place some more short-term solutions so we can see some more immediate changes. I think the call to ensure that our discipline policy recognizes acts of racial aggression as violations that need to be noted is something that is hugely important. You know, as I was listening to all the stories tonight and you know, reading what people have emailed to us, talking to people, you know, remembering my own schooling as the only Indian child in an all-white school, grew up in a very small, primarily white community in Indiana. And when I think about, you know, yeah, like there was one time that a kid hit me, but I got over that. The things that I have never really gotten over are, you know, the time that my second grade reading teacher, who decided that my name was too difficult to pronounce, and so was going to just call me Sunshine because she thought that was acceptable. And I didn't have the language to say, that doesn't feel right because Sunshine is a nice thing, and I guess she's being nice, but no, she wasn't. And as my act of revenge on her, I actually don't remember her name, so I think that's my mind's way of, of erasing her name the way she erased mine. I remember, you know, when I had a crush on a white boy in my class being made fun of by the other students because we're gonna have black and white zebra babies? How would that work? So those are the things that even as an adult stick with me, and I apologize. And those are the things that are gonna stick with our kids. And so that's why it's important that we acknowledge the harm that's being done and record it. And validate it for the students, for the families, to know that we take it seriously. So I think that's an immediate step that we can at least put in place to track these incidents and treat them with the same seriousness that we treat other acts of aggression. I know that there are some of our principals who are doing such brave and bold work in our schools. I know we've highlighted, and I know people are talking about at Lincolnwood with Max Weinberg. I know Adrian Harries has done things at Nichols, and I know there are other principals who are doing good work. I think we need to make sure that we are lifting that up and using that as an example. I know some schools are creating restorative circles for parents within the schools, and I know that we're doing that on a community-wide level, but I would like to encourage all of our principals to engage in this work at the building level and create these spaces for your families and for students. I think in terms of, you know, I appreciate, Lindsay, your comment about we have to, because the system is part of the problem, we really have to think outside the box and beyond the system. And so, you know, I continue to push, and I know that I have several board colleagues who are continue to push for, let's look at different ways of how we define success and achievement. It isn't just MAP scores. And while we don't need to get rid of those and say that that isn't important, let's be expansive in how we define student success. And knowing that maybe there isn't a perfect system already out there, then let's create it. And let's show that our students that they are more than a test score. So those are just some things that I think that we can think about and we can put in place more immediately. We don't have to wait for, sort of the long-term, product of all of the trainings and everything. So I am appreciative of all the work that we have done. I know sometimes I come off as being impatient, that it isn't happening faster and things aren't changing. That isn't because I lack the appreciation for everything that has already happened. We do have, in so many ways, such an incredible community, and I think the number of people that were here earlier and spoke is just a testament to the will that we do have in this community. I know that the will also exists to stop this effort in the community, and so I'm heartened to know that we have community partners, that we have community members who will support us in continuing forward in this. So I appreciate the work that's done so far, and let's just keep it going and keep it moving and not be weary.
Sunny, if I may, one plug. So the Essential 5 survey is out. One of the things that we talked about today is our student voice. As adults, I think that we need to be hearing from the students who are in these classrooms. And this year, we have extended Essential 5 survey from 4th to 8th grade. We actually do read the information from those surveys. I know that it's just another survey, but as we're talking about student voice, I think that it's very important that schools are promoting this survey and that it's not taken lightly. The results from last year, there were some schools that really pushed their communities to take the Essential 5, some not so much. But I can tell you that of the schools that did fill in the information and the feedback that we did get, that has helped to shape a lot of the conversations that we're having. So the survey is open until February 15th. The survey is open now. That's a survey that's available to students, staff, and families. So I just ask that families please take the time to take the survey. It takes 5 minutes. It's really helpful for us to get that information back. And again, as we're asking for our student voice, this is one tool that we have already. And so I would like to challenge our schools to find creative ways, exciting ways to let families know that we have this tool now that they can fill out and share their perspectives on their experiences at schools.
I just wanted to reiterate the importance of keeping track of this information. It's difficult to characterize the harm that's happening, and I think that it's a heavy lift to ask folks to constantly make themselves vulnerable by recounting these stories, including parents who bring their experiences to our attention. The idea that parents are learning this from their children or their children's friends is another trauma. So I think making it an expectation that this information will be tracked and responded to with urgency and with empathy is a really important effort, and it does require some technical response. I think that hopefully sometimes these technical changes result in folks realizing that they have some adaptive work that need to do, and maybe that will be the case here. I'm sorry. It's really important to me that we finalize our adoption of the equity impact assessment tool as a lens through which we are making policy, and that we have that glossary. I think that glossary is incredibly important for us as a governance body in order for us to challenge the fact that we are on the governance body of an institution that has institutional racism baked into it. That tool is meant to be a tool of disruption and awareness building. And so adopting that tool with a glossary, I think, is really important for our governance body, but also for our community. If we are honest with ourselves, we live in a community that has had pretty significant efforts to disrupt this kind of work and disrupt these kinds of conversations. And we need to, sometimes that disruption is rooted in misinformation. And if we want to disrupt misinformation, we have to be transparent and be also on the same page about our vocabulary and our intentions. So I really think that we've been talking about it far too long. We need to just get that done.
A couple quick responses and then a comment. On the documenting the incidences of racist slurs and violent language, that language and that movement is already in the draft policy, the final draft of the policy. So we're moving forward on that internally in terms of that technical fix. On the glossary, Joaquin and I are working on finalizing that and bringing it forward at the February Policy Committee, and so that we can have a conversation, and then we'll set it up for approval. I do want to say, and Suni, you just reminded me of this, that as I embrace what community members have said tonight, and then what Reverend Neighbors and Ms. Heineman have said, that the importance of being bold in our community and moving forward is really important with urgency and dispatch. I want to highlight that there are allies within this system that we also need to celebrate. You just did. We had several of our principals here tonight, and our principals have this as part of their professional learning. We'll have more of this as part of their professional learning as we go forward, and as we debrief and think about how do we operationalize the work. But the circles that have been going on at Washington Elementary, a couple weeks ago at Lincolnwood, there was the first annual community dinner that took 450 people to fill Fleetwood together as a community. There's fantastic work that Mr. Harris is doing, and very brave work at Nichols around affinity groups and being bold about that. There's a Black Student Union at Shoot. Mr. McCollin has opened up those doors and has done just some wonderful, wonderful work there. And I could go down the list of many different principles. So leveraging those principles who are allies is really important. And I do want to highlight and honor the fact that the president of the Teachers Union was here tonight. Yes. And so in institutional structures, those are institutional structures that sometimes are warring factions. And in this evening, Meg Crewley was here, first and foremost as an educator, first and foremost as a parent in the system, and first and foremost as the president of the Teachers Union. And so I want to give her the acknowledgement that she deserves on behalf of our teachers, because it's that leadership that will also start to get translated into many of the questions that have been asked of, and Candace, that you just put on the table, what's really going on in classrooms. And it's the partnership, Anya mentioned this earlier, that we've been doing with our union, and in really thinking about how we structure that relationship so that we can translate that into real action. So again, I want to highlight that as well.
Agreed. I think oftentimes teachers can be the easy targets for some of our anger, and sometimes that's warranted. But I know in our district that a lot of teachers are doing the work, and are really, really committed to doing what they need to do to transform their classrooms and to transform our schools and to push us to be better as a district. So I truly appreciate that Meg was here tonight and all the support that she has offered for this work moving forward. If there,
I had a couple more. Yeah, a couple more things. One, I encourage our entire community to also look at the equity impact assessment tool, and I think that when we talk about building an anti-racist community that is not creating a happy and healthy home for harmful and dehumanizing acts and language, we need to think about how we look for equity in all of our institutions and how we challenge every single institution to live up to those values. So I hope that all of our community thinks about how that tool may be useful in the different work that they're doing and in their institutions, and building organizations that reflect our community and our community's highest values. And I want to reiterate that to our community that you have a listening and empathetic ear here, and we want to continue to hear from you. And that's how we make policy that works, is from including everyone and hearing everyone. Whether you agree or not, I think it's important that we explicitly disagree if we do. That is part of this process as well, in creating responsive policy. So please continue talking to us and holding us accountable. I think that for me, when I think about are things changing, it's how are folks experiencing the policy changes that how are folks living, how is it affecting their lived experience? Does their schooling experience, their work experience, does it feel different? And if it does, how? Is it better? Is it worse? Let's talk about it. That means that we have to listen and we have to engage, and we need to hear from our young people too. And understand that if they're experiencing something differently than we intended, that is real and it deserves to be heard. And then I want to highlight something that I heard tonight, and I've heard in other occasions that I've actually also experienced, is a culture of exclusion and using exclusion, like weaponizing that, and adults utilizing exclusion, whether someone is in or out or a part of or not, as a tool of control or power. I think that we all need to think about, do we have a value of inclusion or exclusion, and how are we modeling that, and how are children then learning to include or exclude? And I heard some of that tonight, and I think that we need to include that as part of our thought process. We need to model for children the value of inclusion and the value of having as many voices at the table as possible, and as many voices and different experiences as part of the group as possible, so that our children are not expecting that what power looks like is isolation, or what power looks like is sameness.
Thank you, everybody, for those who stayed here, for those who were who had to leave. We appreciate your words and your support and your push. Thank you, Ms. Heineman, Dr. Neighbors, and Dr. Stevenson for your work and continued work. We are going to take just a short break before we move on. So thank you, everybody. So given the lateness of the hour, we have decided that our discussion on building safety will be postponed to a later board meeting.
Not that it's not important.
It is incredibly important. We had intentionally put the emotional safety and physical safety discussion together, and I wish we could have discussed them together, but I'm also glad that we were able to give this time and space for the discussion we just had, and want to be able to give the same time and space for the other important discussion about building safety. So we'll postpone that to a future
But let me
board
assure
meeting.
the community and those who are continuing to watch that we have implemented new emergency procedures. We've plastered them throughout the school. We're working with first responders in Evanston on a wide range of emergency procedures. And when we come back, we'll go in detail on what the planning is, how we do things in case of an emergency, and how we will also engage families and community members around this.
So with that, we have our action items.
Before we jump, can I just,
Yes.
to close out before, I feel like I don't know what the next steps are, and I want to ask, not for an answer today, Paul, with your team, like, if we're going to take an anti-racist stance, if we're going to do the work, and we know that it's going to be long work, like, when do we get an update about what's the path forward, right? It's an adaptive challenge, but where are the technical steps that say, on this date, we're going to have a statement, kind of like the equity statement that says, this is what we stand for, and, you know, on what's the timeline forward about, you know, kind of defining how long the work is going to be so that people can see it and we know what it is.
A couple things, just and in the spirit of where we all started tonight, which is accepting non-closure. We're not going to have closure, obviously, tonight, and so, but we did set up 2 community forums in early February so that we can actually do continued work and continued listening to the voices of the community that Anya and Suni encouraged as we did today. So that's one piece. To directly respond to your question, as I also started tonight, we do go on winter holiday starting on Friday. So I will convene my team again as a full team on January 7th, and we'll make that part of our agenda, and then I'll be able to get back to the board and the community at our next board meeting with a more appropriate response, rather than giving you a date that says, you know, we're going to do it by X when we're not quite sure when we're going to do it. I think, but I think the couple slides that we showed, there's a lot of work underway and a lot of work that needs to be done, and then a lot of continued listening and really continued understanding of what Anya put so poignantly is the trauma that people face. And I think a combination of that listening along with action, along with showing what we're doing is going to be important, and that we'll come back with a game plan and a set of dates. Thank you.
Right. So Lindsay's not here. Anya, can you do the consent agenda, please?
Oh, wait, no, I'm not. Oh, I see.
Oh, shit.
Do you want me to give it?
This one here, right? Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, take that.
I move that the Board of Education accept the recommendations outlined in the attached group motion and approve the appointments, leaves, and separations, track appeals, superintendent goals, November board and committee meeting minutes, destruction of October, November 2016 closed session audio recording, September, October 2018 list of bills, treasurer's report, and budget amendment, gift acceptance for Dewey, Nichols, and Lincoln, and the FY20 budget calendar and transportation fees.
So moved.
Mendoza? Yes. Milburn?
Yes.
Chow? Yes. Tanya Rudy?
Yes.
Artha?
Yes. And then, do you want to do the motion on this?
Yeah, I should say. I move that the Board of Education accept the recommendation related to student fees for 2019, fiscal year 1920.
Yeah.
Fiscal year 20.
Right.
Is there a second?
Second.
Did you want to discuss anything about it, or?
I don't have it, I mean, not a need for discussion, but my concern was the magnitude of the increase from this year to last year, and I wasn't there for the discussion last year, or last week, and I know you covered, or 2 weeks ago, and I know you covered a number of that, so, about it, but I wanted to make sure that, just that my voice could be heard differently than recommending that we go forward as we are. I just feel like the magnitude of increases is a lot for 1 year. So.
Can we get the roll call?
Mendoza?
Yes.
Halpern?
Yes.
Chow?
No.
Tanya Woody?
I missed a part of the conversation, so I'm gonna abstain from right now.
Cartha?
Yes.
Is that on a quorum?
We have
We have a quorum, but we don't
We
have.
have a quorum, but
it passes 3 to 1 with one abstention. So that's, we still had 5.
The abstention is viewed as a negative vote.
Right, so, but it's still, motion carries. Can we move to the adoption of the 2018 tax levy? Joey?
I move that the Board of Education approve all resolutions and certifications pertaining to the 2018 tax levy.
Second.
Mendoza?
Yes.
Halpern?
Yes.
Chow?
Yes.
Tanya Woody?
Yes.
Cartha?
Yes. Candace?
Oh.
You do the resolution authorizing intervention?
I move that the board adopt the resolution authorizing intervention in proceedings before the State of Illinois Property Tax Appeal Board.
Second.
Mendoza?
Yes.
Halpern?
Yes.
Chow?
Yes.
Tanya Woody?
Yes.
Cartha?
Yes. Those are our action items. The only note that I want to make about upcoming work is, as already was noted, the policy committee meeting, which was originally listed on the calendar as being in January, is being moved to February 5th. And otherwise, with no more business before the board, I adjourn this meeting at 10:40 p.m. Thank you all.